Imagine closing your eyes at night and actually feeling at peace. Not just tired, not just scrolling through your phone, but calm, still, safe. Now, be honest. How many times have you gone to bed with a heavy heart? Carrying pain from the past, replaying the same old arguments, wishing you could just let go, but not knowing how. The way you end your day matters. If your nights are full of tension, regrets, and emotional clutter, your sleep will suffer. And without good sleep, your mind stays foggy, your heart stays heavy, and your peace stays out of reach. But if you learn to let go, truly let go, you won't just sleep better. You'll heal, you'll forgive, you'll feel free. Tonight, you're going to discover the Zen path to emotional peace. These are not random tips. These are powerful practices passed down through centuries, designed to help you forgive deeply, heal fully, and sleep like you haven't in years. This is not theory. This is transformation. You'll learn how to release pain, quiet your mind, and let your heart finally rest. From silent rituals to breathwork, from night meditations to gentle movements, everything you're about to hear is built to calm your nervous system and lighten your soul. But before we start, I want you to do one small thing. Make a promise to yourself. Write this in the comments. Starting tonight, I am letting go. I am healing. I am Zen. This isn't just a sentence. It's a seed, a signal to your mind that you are ready to change. The more you say it, the more real it becomes. So write it now and say it like you mean it. Because what's coming next is more than 3 hours of Zen. It's 3 hours of coming home to yourself. To peace, to healing, to real rest. Let's begin. There's a quiet moment right after the lights go off and the world slows down, where the truth creeps in. The grudge you've held, the resentment that simmers under your smile, the ache that never fully leaves. It all shows up, uninvited, still breathing, still waiting for resolution. You might not speak of it often, but you feel it. That lingering sense that someone owes you something, an apology, an explanation, a sign that the universe is paying attention, that what happened to you wasn't fair and someone, somewhere, needs to make it right. That need, the craving for justice, for being right, is one of the heaviest weights the human heart can carry. Zen doesn't offer you a courtroom. It doesn't promise that your pain will be acknowledged by those who caused it. What it offers is something harder, but infinitely more powerful. The ability to walk away from the courtroom in your mind and step into peace. Letting go of justice doesn't mean giving up. It means setting yourself free. It starts with noticing how tightly you're holding on. That tiny reaction when someone cuts you off in traffic. The sting when someone gets credit you deserve. The mental replay of conversations where you were dismissed, misunderstood, or betrayed. These aren't random frustrations. They're part of the same web, the ego's need to be right, to be seen, to win. Zen helps you cut that web, thread by thread, until you can finally breathe again. The practice doesn't ask you to deny your feelings. In fact, it asks you to see them clearly, without judgment. What it does ask is that you stop feeding the flame. That you notice how craving fairness often becomes a trap, where you rehearse pain again and again, hoping it will resolve itself if you just think hard enough. But it doesn't. Because justice, as your mind wants it, is not peace. Justice is external. Peace is internal. When you rely on external outcomes to soothe internal wounds, you hand over your power. You say, "I can only feel okay if they admit they were wrong." You make your peace dependent on someone else's awareness, which they may never have. Zen invites you back to yourself. It teaches that every desire for fairness is really a desire for recognition. You want someone to see your pain, to understand it, to care. But in waiting for them to do that, you forget that you can offer yourself the same thing right now. You can say, "Yes, that hurt." You can say, "That should not have happened." And then, instead of staying in the spiral of blame or hope, you can soften your grip. This softening is not passive, it's fierce. It takes more strength to walk away from a battle you know you could win than to keep fighting. But here's the truth. Even if you win, you still lose if peace isn't part of the victory. Zen detachment doesn't mean you become cold or indifferent. It means you become clear enough to see what's yours and what isn't. You stop trying to carry other people's ignorance on your back. You stop trying to fix what they refuse to see. And most importantly, you stop thinking that their awareness is necessary for your healing. Letting go of justice means you stop chasing the apology that may never come. You stop writing angry letters in your head. You stop waiting for karma to do your work for you. Instead, you choose the harder path, closure without confirmation. This kind of closure isn't about pretending it didn't matter. It's about deciding that your peace matters more. Zen teaches through presence, through breath, through repetition. Every time you notice yourself mentally arguing with someone, that's a moment to come back. Back to now. Back to your breath. Back to the stillness underneath your thoughts. It doesn't matter how many times your mind tries to pull you back into the fight. You simply return. That's the practice. Return again and again until the need to be right dissolves into the need to be free. Freedom begins with ownership, not of blame, but of attention. If your attention is tied up in past offenses, you are not living. You're reliving. Zen asks, how many moments will you sacrifice to stories you can't change? The ego doesn't like this question. It insists that justice is noble. But what it really means is, I don't want to let go until I get what I think I'm owed. And sometimes that means you wait for years, even decades, for words that never arrive. Meanwhile, your body carries the tension. Your breath stays shallow. Your nights stay restless. The irony is, the more you insist on being right, the more you live wrong. Because life moves, people move, and if you don't let go, you stay stuck in a moment that's already gone. Zen doesn't argue with the past. It bows to it. You might think, but they should know what they did. Maybe they should. But if they don't, how long will you carry their ignorance in your heart? Zen detachment is not about erasing your memory. It's about changing your relationship to it. You can remember without re-injuring yourself. You can say, yes, that happened, and not have it define your worth or steal your joy. This is where forgiveness begins, not in forgetting, but in freeing. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you do. Because your nervous system wasn't built to carry betrayal forever. Because your mind wasn't built to replay the same wound for 10 years. Because your spirit wants to rest. And yes, your ego may scream that this isn't fair. Zen doesn't argue with the ego. It watches, it waits, it breathes. Eventually, you realize the ego is just scared. It thinks that letting go means losing. But peace isn't a loss. Peace is the prize. When you release the need to be right, something incredible happens. You begin to live in the moment instead of in the courtroom of your past. You stop rehearsing speeches and start listening. You stop proving and start feeling. You stop performing justice and start embodying grace. This doesn't mean you never speak up. Zen isn't silence in the face of abuse. It's clarity. It's knowing when to speak and when to walk away, not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because sometimes silence says more than an argument ever could. And when you do speak, you speak from presence, not pain. Not as someone trying to win, but as someone who no longer needs to. You might be surprised how people respond to this energy. Some will notice the change, others won't, and that's okay. Zen is not about changing others. It's about changing your relationship to reality. There's something sacred about choosing peace when you could choose anger, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You've seen what anger does to the heart when it stays too long. You've seen how much energy it steals. You've felt what it's like to try and sleep with a racing mind, a clenched jaw, a restless soul. Letting go of justice doesn't mean injustice didn't happen. It means you refuse to keep feeding it. You choose to stop building stories around pain. You choose to stop proving that you were right. You know you were. That's enough. Your healing doesn't depend on their apology. It depends on your decision. Every breath you take in awareness is a step toward freedom. Not dramatic, not loud, just steady. One step, one breath, one release at a time. And the more you do this, the lighter you feel. Not all at once, but gradually. You notice you're not triggered by the same things. Your body softens. Your heart opens. Sleep becomes easier. Joy becomes more accessible. Life becomes livable, not in theory, but in experience. You become less reactive. You no longer need to defend your worth. You no longer need everyone to understand you. You stop needing to win every debate, every disagreement, because you're not trying to prove anything anymore. You've come home to yourself. And once that happens, something even deeper occurs. Compassion. Compassion doesn't mean you excuse what happened. It means you stop adding to the suffering. You stop resenting. You start understanding that hurt people, and that you don't need to carry their wound with you. You begin to wish them peace, not because they deserve it, but because you do. Forgiveness becomes easier, not as an act, but as a state. You live in forgiveness because you live in presence. And in presence, there is no room for old battles, only awareness, only breath, only now. This is the Zen of letting go of justice. It doesn't ask for fanfare. It doesn't require a spiritual retreat or a perfect setting. It only asks that you notice when you're clinging, and then let go. Again and again, until the clinging stops, until peace becomes natural, until sleep comes without effort, until your breath becomes the only proof you need that you are alive, that you are free, and that nothing more needs to be said. Even after we release the need to be right, there's often something left behind, a feeling that's harder to name. It hides in the pauses between thoughts. It lingers when the room is quiet. It shows up in the body before it makes sense in the mind. A dull ache, a quiet weight. You've let go of the story, but the story hasn't let go of you. There are some emotions that logic can't touch. Some pain that slips through even the sharpest self-awareness. You know you've done the work. You've journaled, meditated, breathed, and still, there it is. Something tight in the chest, something unsettled in the heart. This is where Zen offers you something unexpected. Not an answer, not a cure, but a question. A question that doesn't make sense, that twists your thoughts, that stops the thinking mind in its tracks and drops you straight into presence. A Zen koan. A koan isn't a puzzle to solve. It's a mirror to your current state of mind. It doesn't explain pain, it bypasses it. It doesn't fix wounds, it exposes what was never wounded to begin with. When deep-seated emotional pain becomes part of your identity, words can't always reach it. Language reinforces the ego. Stories strengthen the sense of separation. Koans do the opposite. They short-circuit the narrative, pulling you into something deeper than understanding, awareness. When a teacher asks, "What is the sound of one hand clapping?" the rational mind panics. It wants to figure it out, but the more you try, the further away you get. That frustration, that moment where the mind surrenders, is the beginning of transformation. Not because you found the answer, but because you stopped needing one. That's where healing begins. Emotional pain often stays alive through our need to explain it. We revisit the past. We analyze why they did what they did. We try to find meaning. But not all pain needs meaning. Some pain just needs space. Not space to grow, but space to be witnessed without judgment, to be seen and held without being picked apart. Koans make room for that. They allow you to sit with confusion without needing to fix it, to feel sadness without drowning in it, to hold anger without directing it. When you're working with a koan, you're not trying to win or achieve anything. You're learning how to sit in discomfort without closing your heart. And that's where emotional liberation begins. Not by escaping pain, but by no longer being its prisoner. One of the most powerful aspects of koans is that they bring up your patterns, the way you react when you don't understand, the urge to prove, to resist, to dismiss. Every koan reflects a part of you that resists the unknown. That resistance is often the same force that holds on to old pain. You'll notice the same internal voice come up. This doesn't make sense. This is stupid. What's the point? That voice is also the one that says, "I can't let this go." They need to understand. I need closure. See the link? Koans don't just challenge your thoughts, they challenge your identity. They ask, who are you without this pain, without this belief, without this story? Not with words, with silence. And in that silence, the emotional walls begin to tremble. Not from pressure, from presence. Koans are emotional mirrors because they show you your edges, where you become tight, where you want control, where you demand order. Pain thrives in those places, where we resist life's messiness, where we want answers to fit our expectations. But life, like a koan, often won't make sense. It will give you loss without explanation, betrayal without reason, change without warning. When you work with a koan, like, what was your original face before you were born? Your mind scrambles. It cannot answer, but in that moment, it also pauses. And when the mind pauses, the heart can speak. Emotional pain isn't just about what happened. It's about the meaning we gave it, the story we repeat. Koans interrupt that story, not by replacing it, but by showing that we are more than our interpretation. A koan can't be solved with logic. That's the point. It pulls you out of your usual way of thinking. That shift can also pull you out of suffering, because suffering is often maintained by linear thought. If this happened, then that must mean I'm not worthy. If they treated me this way, then I must have done something wrong. Koans pull you into the space before those thoughts arise. This space is where real healing happens. Not through effort, through presence. When you sit with a koan, it works on you, even if you don't understand it. Especially if you don't understand it. Your ego won't like it. It will call it nonsense. But something deeper will stir. The part of you that knows without needing proof. The part that remembers peace, even after years of pain. That part doesn't need words. Koans can also open old wounds in a way that's safe. Not to relive them, but to release what's still stuck. Emotions that were frozen in time. Grief that never had a witness. Anger that never had a voice. You might not know why you're crying. You don't need to. The tears are the answer your mind could never find. Sometimes the question itself is the medicine. Koans also reveal your expectations. We think healing should look a certain way. Be gentle, be clear. But sometimes healing looks like confusion, like not knowing, like having no idea what to do next, and staying there without running. That's the gift of the koan. It teaches you to stay with the unknown, to stay with the pain, to stay without trying to fix. Because in the staying, something breaks open. Not in a dramatic moment, but in stillness, in silence, in the space where you stop trying to change what is and simply be with it. Many people use koans in meditation, repeating the same phrase for weeks or months. Not to get the right answer, but to feel what comes up. What stories arise, what feelings surface. Each one is an invitation, an opening. You start to see how you react to frustration, how your mind wants to avoid, explain, or escape. And you learn to pause, to stay open, to feel the edge and not retreat. This is what emotional liberation feels like. Not the absence of emotion, but the absence of fear around emotion. You can sit with grief without drowning, sit with anger without attacking, sit with longing without collapsing, because you've trained your nervous system to hold discomfort without closing down. Koans also train humility, the kind of humility that says, I don't need to know, I don't need to understand everything to be at peace. That humility softens the ego's grip. It makes room for kindness, for presence, for a different kind of strength, the strength to sit in the unknown and still be whole. There's no finish line with a koan, no achievement to unlock. That's what makes it so different from how we're taught to live. We want progress, evidence, resolution. But some wounds don't heal in straight lines. Some wounds need space, not solutions. Silence, not strategies. Koans teach you to live inside the question. That shift alone can be a release. When you stop needing to find the answer, you start listening, deeper, slower, not just with your ears, but with your being. You start feeling into the spaces you once avoided, and you find they're not as scary as you thought. Because when you meet pain without trying to push it away, it starts to move. It softens. It flows. Not because you forced it, but because you finally stopped resisting it. That's the paradox, the same paradox that every koan contains. It's also the paradox of healing. The more you try to fix the pain, the tighter it holds on. The more you allow it, the more it releases. Koans help you see this not through philosophy, but through experience. Every time your mind fails to grasp the riddle, your ego shrinks just a little. Every time you return to the phrase, your presence deepens. And eventually, you're not repeating the koan to find an answer. You're using it to meet yourself. That's what liberation looks like. Not a life without pain, but a life where pain no longer defines who you are, where your heart stays open even when things don't make sense, where your breath flows even when old wounds return, where peace is not a destination, but a presence you carry through every moment, light or dark, clear or confusing. The koan is your practice, your mirror, your path, not to escape your story, but to see that you were never the story to begin with. Even when the mind stops searching for answers and the heart softens in the silence of a koan, there are still some things left unsaid. The pain we caused others, the pain they caused us, the heaviness that words can't lift. Because sometimes language fails where presence begins, and some of the deepest wounds live in the spaces between what was spoken and what never will be. There are moments in life when the apology never arrives, or when we are the ones who can't find the words, not because we don't feel sorry, but because nothing we say seems enough. Because certain hurts are so layered, so old, so quiet, that they've slipped beyond the reach of language. This is where Zen meets the heart, not in explanation, not in confession, but in being, in quiet, in shared space without defense, in the kind of apology that doesn't rely on sound to be heard. The art of silent apology isn't about hiding. It's about healing in a different way. It's what happens when words lose their weight and the body speaks instead, through presence, through awareness, through an openness that needs no script. When we've hurt someone, we often rush to fix it. We want to be forgiven quickly. We want to say the right thing. We want to repair what we broke. But rushing comes from discomfort, from wanting relief from guilt, not necessarily from wanting to understand the pain we caused. A silent apology begins in stillness. It begins when we stop trying to manage the other person's emotions and start facing our own. When we let ourselves feel the weight of our actions without trying to escape them. When we offer our presence, not to take away the pain, but to say, without words, I see what I did. This kind of seeing is not passive. It's an act of courage. To sit in front of someone you've hurt and say nothing, while your entire being communicates your sincerity, requires humility. It requires that you put aside the ego's desire to be forgiven and instead prioritize the other's need to be felt. Because sometimes saying, I'm sorry, too soon or too often, becomes another form of control. It centers our need to be absolved, not their need to be understood. But when we offer silence, not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of presence, we give them space to feel what they feel, without pressure, without expectation. Silent apology also lives in gestures, in how we carry ourselves after the damage is done, in how we move, how we hold space, how we soften, in whether we take responsibility through consistent actions, not dramatic words. In Zen, bows are often used as a form of apology. A bow isn't just a movement, it's a symbol of surrender, of reverence, of acknowledgement. When you bow to someone, you are saying, "I see your humanity, I see your pain, I lower my defenses to honor your experience." You're not asking for anything, you're offering your awareness. This is where healing begins, not with the cleverness of what we say, but with the honesty of how we show up, without defenses, without spin, without trying to be seen as the good one. Silent apology also requires patience. Just because we feel ready to make peace doesn't mean the other person is. Just because we're sincere doesn't mean they owe us their forgiveness. Healing happens in its own time, and real apology holds space for that. In some cases, the person we've hurt isn't available. They're gone, or too wounded to meet us, or unwilling. That doesn't mean the apology can't happen. It just means it happens differently. In meditation, in the way we live, in how we carry the lessons forward. When you sit with the regret in silence, when you breathe with it, when you let it be seen in the privacy of your awareness, you are still apologizing. You are saying to life itself, "I understand more now." And that understanding is powerful. It changes how you move, how you speak, how you love in the future. The same is true when you are the one who needs an apology you'll never get. The pain of being wronged and never acknowledged can linger for years. Words you longed to hear but never came. Responsibility that was never taken. What do you do with that? You listen for the apology beneath the silence, not from the person, but from reality, from the awareness that their inability to apologize wasn't about your worth. It was about their own limitations, their blind spots, their wounds, and while that doesn't erase the hurt, it allows you to stop waiting. You can bow for them, not to excuse them, but to release yourself. You can hold a space of forgiveness that doesn't depend on their readiness. You can let go, not for them, but for your own peace. Zen teaches us that deep healing happens when we let go of the need to hear the words and start listening to what cannot be said. The subtle shifts in energy, the way someone carries guilt in their eyes, the way they look away, or the way they keep showing up, quietly, trying to make things right through how they treat you, even if the words never come. This is not about pretending everything is okay. It's about becoming sensitive to the truth that lives beneath the surface, learning to recognize that not every apology will sound like, "I'm sorry." Some will arrive as a steady presence, as a changed behavior, as a meal cooked without asking, as a phone call after years of silence. And if you're the one offering this kind of apology, you'll know that it's not about making a speech. It's about staying, not fixing, not defending, just staying, with your heart open, even when theirs is not. Sometimes, the most healing thing you can do is to stop talking. Not because words aren't valuable, but because they can only go so far. Presence can go further. Presence can be felt even when trust has been broken. It doesn't erase the past, but it creates a space where a different future becomes possible. Presence says, I won't push you to forgive me. I won't demand anything. I will simply remain open, honest, willing to understand. That willingness is healing in itself. Mindfulness plays a central role in this process. When you are truly mindful, you are no longer trying to rush through discomfort. You are with it, breathing through it, allowing it to speak. In that space, the apology is no longer a line you recite. It's the energy you carry, the sincerity in your breath, the calm in your voice, the pause before you react. Mindfulness brings your full self into the room, and when you're fully there, others feel it. They feel that you are not distracted, not defensive, not performing, just here. That kind of presence says more than words ever could. In moments of great tension, where both people are hurt, silent acknowledgement can open a door, not by forcing a resolution, but by showing that you're willing to sit in the fire with them, that you're not above the pain, that you feel it too. It's easy to say, let's move on. Much harder to sit in the space where there's nothing to say and still stay present, still stay kind. This doesn't mean you tolerate abuse. Silence is only healing when it's chosen with intention, not when it's forced through fear. The kind of silence that heals is not the absence of voice, it's the presence of awareness. There are also moments when silent apology is best offered through ritual. A walk taken with intention, a letter written but never sent, a candle lit for the one you hurt, a prayer spoken into the wind. These acts don't erase the past, but they open your heart. And an open heart is the foundation of every apology worth making. We live in a world obsessed with saying the right thing. But some of the deepest healing happens when we say nothing at all. When we drop into our body, into our breath, into the energy we carry and the space we hold. This is not about avoiding responsibility, it's about expanding it, beyond just language, into presence, into action, into the subtle changes that show we are truly sorry. Healing without words isn't mysterious, it's deeply human. It's what children do when they crawl into their parents' lap after a fight. It's what lovers do when they hold each other after hurting each other. It's what friends do when they sit in silence, letting tears speak for them. You've probably experienced this without naming it. The hug that made everything okay. The long glance that said more than an entire conversation. The quiet that followed real understanding. These are silent apologies, and they are sacred because they bypass the defenses. They go directly to the heart, and in a world full of noise, they stand out, not as absence, but as presence, as attention, as care. So whether you're the one seeking forgiveness or the one offering it, know this: you don't always have to say the perfect thing. You just have to show up with your whole self, with honesty, with stillness, with the willingness to feel. Sometimes that's all it takes to begin again. And when you do, when you offer that kind of presence, healing starts to unfold quietly, naturally, like breath, like forgiveness that needs no name. Even after presence brings its quiet medicine, even after words fall away and gestures begin to speak, there's still a space we all return to, a space where we are completely unguarded. In this space, apologies fade, logic dissolves, and time unravels. We enter it every night, willingly or not, and in this space, our deeper stories begin to surface. This space is sleep. Most treat sleep as an end, an escape from the day, a break from the mind. But Zen sees it differently. Sleep is not an end. It's a doorway, a sacred part of your practice, a time when the conscious mind releases its grip and the subtle mind begins to speak. What it says, if you learn to listen, can change everything. Dreams in this tradition are not random. They are not just noise or leftover thoughts. They are mirrors. They reflect what is not yet seen during waking hours. They carry messages in symbols, in feelings, in patterns. In Zen, we don't push them away or try to interpret them with rigid rules. We meet them like a monk would meet a guest, curious, respectful, open. The problem in modern life is that sleep has become purely mechanical, a checkbox, something to fix when broken, something to hack when inconvenient. But when sleep is only treated as recovery, its deeper nature is missed. It stops being sacred, and with that loss, we also lose access to some of our most profound insights and emotional healing. Zen approaches sleep not as a problem to solve, but as a process to respect. Before sleep begins, the preparation is just as important as the rest itself. What state of mind are you bringing into that space? What thoughts are you feeding yourself as you lie down? What unresolved energy are you carrying into your dreams? Your answers shape the journey of your sleep. Because the body may rest, but the deeper layers of the mind continue moving. They whisper through symbols and images. They don't speak in straight lines. They spiral. They revisit. They repeat. Not to confuse, but to process. When Zen practitioners prepare for sleep, they often do so with ritual, not elaborate, but intentional. The room is simplified. The light is softened. The breath is followed. The thoughts are noticed, but not attached to. This is not just for better sleep hygiene, it is spiritual hygiene, clearing the space not only for rest, but for awareness within that rest. The transition from waking to sleep is seen as a continuation, not a break. In Zen, nothing is truly separate. Sleep is not the opposite of practice. It is practice in a different form. It teaches surrender. It invites trust. It asks us to release our grip on the world and enter a state where control is no longer possible. And that is why it is so important to meet sleep consciously. The act of falling asleep can become a meditation in itself. The final thoughts before sleep are like seeds. They root in the soil of your subconscious and bloom into dreams. If those seeds are fear, distraction, unresolved guilt, your dreams will reflect that. If those seeds are awareness, peace, humility, your dreams begin to change. This doesn't mean you control your dreams. Zen is not about control, it's about alignment. When your waking life is lived with mindfulness, your sleeping life begins to carry the same quality. In sleep, you meet your shadow more honestly. You see the emotions you ignored, the memories you buried, the needs you pretend not to have. They come back, not to punish, but to be felt. Dreaming, then, becomes a Dharma gate, a path that invites you to know yourself more fully, not through analysis, but through presence. Some dreams are soft, others are disturbing, some leave no trace, others shake something loose in you. Each of these experiences has a place in practice. Zen teaches that we bow to all of it, the beautiful and the frightening, the clear and the confusing, because it is all teaching, it is all truth in some form. Nightmares in particular are often misunderstood. Most try to push them away, to forget, but Zen asks us to turn toward them, to ask gently, "What are you trying to show me?" Often, nightmares are old pain, returning in symbols, asking to be released, not through force, but through compassion. Acknowledging them, instead of running, shifts their energy. It brings light to the corners the waking mind avoids. Sometimes, a dream offers a moment of clarity, a word, a gesture, a memory. Not dramatic, but quietly profound. When you're attuned to this, you begin to carry a notebook. Not to decode every symbol like a puzzle, but to stay close to what matters. To treat the dream world with the same care you offer the outer world. In Zen monasteries, practitioners often wake in the middle of the night to sit. They don't see this as a disruption. They treat it as a calling. The quiet hours are sacred. The boundary between waking and dreaming is thin. To sit in that space is to meet a part of yourself you can't access in daylight. You can do this too. If you wake in the night, instead of reaching for distraction, try sitting, just for a few minutes. Breathe, feel, ask gently, what wants to be known right now? And listen, not with the mind, but with the whole body. Sometimes what rises is not a thought, but a release, a tear, a memory, a wave of sensation. These moments, subtle as they are part of the healing path. Healing in sleep doesn't happen through the mind's effort. It happens through surrender. When we drop into deep rest, the nervous system softens, the defenses fall, the emotional backlog of the day begins to process. And when that rest is supported by intention, by gentle rituals, by care, the depth of that healing multiplies. Zen also emphasizes waking up with awareness. The moment your eyes open is part of practice. What is the first thing you feel? What thought rises first? What energy do you bring into the day? Many people wake already burdened, already tense. But that moment is a powerful window. It's a return. And how you meet it sets the tone for what follows. A mindful waking practice might be as simple as pausing before you move, feeling your breath, placing a hand on your heart, offering a phrase like, "Thank you," or "I return with clarity." It's not a performance, it's a recognition that this new day is not just a routine, but a chance to begin again, awake in both senses of the word. Over time, this approach to sleep creates deep changes. It softens the sharp edges of stress. It clears emotional clutter. It deepens intuition. Not because sleep becomes perfect, but because sleep becomes sacred again. You treat it with the respect it deserves. The modern world often mocks rest. It glorifies grinding, achieving, staying up late to do more. But Zen whispers a different truth. Rest is not weakness. Sleep is not waste. These are necessary states of renewal, not just for the body, but for the soul. To sleep consciously is to honor the full rhythm of life. Activity and stillness. Movement and return. Thought and silence. In this rhythm, there is balance. And in that balance, you find a kind of peace that cannot be reached through effort alone. Dreams, when treated with reverence, become part of the practice. Not a sideshow, not a curiosity, but a path, a space where your inner teacher can speak, not in words, in images, in feelings, in truths you are finally ready to feel. By shifting your relationship with sleep, you shift your relationship with yourself. You no longer see rest as a break from life, but as a part of life. Not something separate from growth, but essential to it. And in that shift, you begin to trust yourself more. You begin to trust the messages that come. You begin to meet the night not with resistance, but with openness. You begin to see that healing does not happen only in the light, but also in the deep, quiet dark. Where breath slows, where the body softens, where the spirit speaks, and nothing needs to be said to be known. After learning to meet the night with reverence, to treat dreams as sacred, and to greet the silence of sleep as an opening to deeper presence, there's another practice that reaches even further into the body. This practice doesn't use words, thoughts, or intentions. It uses the entire self, muscle, breath, gravity, and through this, it becomes something rare, a direct path to humility, to softening, to peace. It is the act of bowing. Bowing in Zen is not symbolic. It is not done for appearance or tradition. It is a lived expression of surrender, recognition, and release. Every motion, rising, lowering, touching forehead to the floor, is deliberate. Every movement carries meaning. Not the kind of meaning that needs explanation, but the kind that bypasses the mind and speaks straight to the heart. In a world where most healing focuses on words, bowing returns us to the body. It speaks to the parts of us that are tired of talking, tired of thinking, tired of trying to explain. It meets the pain that sits below the surface, the pain that lives in the chest, the throat, the shoulders, the kind of pain that builds when we carry old resentments, hold grudges, keep stories running long after they've passed. Resentment is a tension. It's held in the body like armor. It appears in the way we stand, in how we breathe, in how we look at someone. It's a quiet refusal to release, a gripping, a guarding. Often, we aren't even aware of how much we're holding until something, someone, asks us to soften. Bowing asks this, gently but without compromise. There is no way to bow with resentment fully intact. Not because the act forces anything, but because the posture of bowing, physically, emotionally, energetically, calls forth something else. It calls forth humility, and not the performative kind, the real kind, the kind that whispers, I am no higher, I am no lower, I let go. The structure of a Zen bow varies, but the essence is constant. There is a pause, hands pressed together, a breath. The body leans forward, knees bend, the forehead touches the ground. Then a return to upright. It seems simple, but inside, the simplicity is a profound letting go. That pause before the bow begins is important. It's where the intention gathers, not as a thought, but as presence. In that breath, you feel everything that wants to resist the act. All the reasons not to bow, all the tightness, all the pride. That's the moment where the work begins. As you bend, something else bends too, the narrative. The one where you were right and they were wrong. the one where your pain had to be proven before it could be released. It doesn't disappear, but it becomes less solid, more fluid. The act of lowering the body lowers the story. It doesn't erase it. It puts it in perspective. Touching your forehead to the ground is not just symbolic. It puts your head below your heart. This shift has energetic power. It allows the thinking mind to pause and the feeling body to lead. You are not explaining your forgiveness. You are offering it without needing words. You are placing yourself in a posture that says, "I let go of needing to win." This movement changes the breath. When you bow with sincerity, the breath deepens. The tension around the heart softens. The body feels heavier in a good way, grounded, surrendered. There is no tension in full prostration. There can't be. Resentment needs tension to survive. In this posture, it starts to dissolve. Bowing is especially powerful when done with someone you struggle to forgive. You do not have to speak. You do not even have to be face to face. You can bow toward their presence. You can bow toward their name. You can bow toward the pain. The gesture is not for them, it's for you. It is a declaration that you are ready to put the burden down. If it feels unnatural, that's okay. We are taught not to bow. We are taught to stand tall, to stay guarded, to be proud. Bowing may feel vulnerable, strange, even foolish, but that is where its power lies. It disrupts the ego's control. It interrupts the loop of defensiveness. It invites a new kind of strength, the strength to soften. When you incorporate bowing into daily practice, it starts to shift how you carry yourself the rest of the day. You begin to notice the small resistances, the glances that judge, the thoughts that linger on unfairness, the tones that come from pride. You begin to see these patterns not as personality, but as habits that can be released. Resentment often hides in the background. It becomes part of the emotional landscape, shaping reactions, coloring relationships, feeding tension. Because it's not loud, it's easy to live with for a long time. But it leaves its mark. It dulls the joy in connection. It holds back love. It builds barriers, even when you want to open. Bowing breaks the pattern, even if only for a moment. That moment is enough to start something new. A relationship that was frozen begins to move. A grudge that seemed permanent begins to loosen. Not because the past changed, but because your posture toward it did. This kind of practice can be done alone, in silence. It can be done at the start of meditation, or before sleep, or in moments of emotional heaviness. The key is sincerity. Without it, bowing is just performance. With it, bowing is medicine. Some Zen practitioners bow hundreds of times a day, not as punishment, as devotion. Each bow is a drop of water against the stone of the self. Slowly, over time, the hard edges soften. The pride, the pain, the grip of the old stories, they begin to fade. Not from rejection, but from gentle repetition. When you bow regularly, your concept of self begins to shift. You no longer see yourself as fixed. You no longer feel the need to defend every reaction. You become more open, more flexible, less attached to being right, more willing to understand. This shift affects how you respond to others. You become less reactive, less quick to judge, less in need of being seen as the one who knows. Bowing teaches that peace is not found in being above others. It's found in meeting them where they are without needing to control the outcome. In moments of conflict, remembering the bow, even if only internally, can stop the spiral. It can turn a defensive reaction into a breath, a closing into an opening, a sharp word into silence. And from that silence, something new can grow. If you've never bowed as part of your emotional practice, start small. A single bow with full awareness is more powerful than 1,000 done without presence. Let your body teach you. Let the movement guide the mind. Over time, it will feel more natural, more healing, more essential. Bowing also connects you to lineage, to all those who have bowed before you, who faced their own pain, their own pride, their own need to be right, and chose to let go. You are not alone in this practice. You are part of a quiet, powerful tradition that transcends culture and time. And in that lineage, there is strength. You feel it in your bones, in your breath, in the stillness after the bow. That stillness is not empty. It is filled with all that has been released, with all that no longer needs to be carried. The more you bow, the more you understand that forgiveness is not always a grand event. Sometimes it is a simple movement, a quiet breath, a forehead to the ground, a whisper not of words, but of willingness, a letting go again and again until the heart no longer clings. This is how Zen dissolves resentment, not through force, not through explanation, through presence, through motion, through the humility of the body and the honesty of the heart, through the simple, radical act of bowing, fully, freely, completely. When the body bows, when pride softens and the ego quiets, a different kind of presence becomes possible. One that doesn't demand surrender, but invites it gently. One that doesn't shake you, but steadies you. After the physical expression of humility, after the breath has deepened and the grudges have loosened their grip, you may notice a craving not for more release, but for restoration. Not to fight or fix, but simply to feel whole again. This is where the tea ceremony enters. Not as a performance, not as a decorative ritual, but as medicine, as real, grounded healing. In Zen, the tea ceremony is not a social activity. It is not for entertainment. It is not hurried, nor is it casual. It is a practice of care, care for the moment, for the body, for space, for the invisible wounds that modern life rarely allows time to tend. In this space, you don't just make tea, you make peace. The ceremony is rooted in 4 principles: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. Each of these is not just a concept to understand, but a quality to embody. The way you touch the cup, the way you move through the space, the way you sit, it all reflects your internal state. But even more, it reshapes that state as you move. This is where its healing power lives. Every part of the tea ritual has meaning. The act of cleaning the utensils is not about germs. It is a purification of mind, a symbolic clearing of emotional clutter. Each movement is slow, intentional. You are not rushing through a task. You are engaging in presence. The water isn't boiled aggressively. It is coaxed to warmth. The tea isn't poured for speed. It is offered like a gift. Your awareness expands into every detail: the texture of the bowl, the sound of steam rising, the fragrance rising just before the first sip. You are fully inside the moment, not reaching ahead, not falling behind. You become the space where peace grows quietly. This ceremony teaches that healing doesn't always require effort. Sometimes it requires attention, not the kind of attention that analyzes, but the kind that watches, that listens, that receives. In a tea ceremony, you do not talk. The silence isn't awkward. It's sacred. It allows emotions to settle like leaves in a steeping pot. The inner restlessness that demands distraction begins to slow. You are no longer performing for anyone. You are no longer chasing anything. You are simply being. That alone is deeply nourishing. The emotional reset that occurs during this process is not forced. It arises naturally from the quality of your presence. When you are fully present, the nervous system calms. The tension in the muscles begins to soften. The breath becomes steady without trying. This physiological shift supports emotional stability. You do not have to fight for balance. It returns gently as you slow down. What's unique about the tea ritual is that it doesn't require spiritual language to be spiritual. There is no preaching, no belief system imposed. The act itself, precise, beautiful, quiet, is the teaching. The lesson is in the doing. That's why even people who know nothing about Zen feel different after participating in a true tea ceremony. They may not know why they feel calmer. They may not understand the layers of tradition behind each movement. But something shifts. Something opens. That is the medicine working, quietly, without explanation. This medicine is also in the humility of the ritual. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is rushed. The guest bows to the host. The host bows to the tools. There is no hierarchy. There is only reverence for the moment, for the objects, for each other. This resets emotional equilibrium by removing the silent power games that often define social interaction. The ceremony also gives shape to emotion. It offers a container. When you are overwhelmed, scattered, emotionally tangled, stepping into this kind of structure gives the nervous system a boundary. Not a barrier, a form. Like a bowl holds water, the ritual holds your emotional state, allowing it to be present without spilling uncontrollably. It also reintroduces you to beauty, not the kind of beauty that impresses or decorates, but the kind that heals by reminding you of simplicity, a single flower in the alcove, the curve of a ceramic cup, the quiet rhythm of hands moving in silence. This kind of beauty is grounding. It slows the mind. It softens the heart. It opens space for peace to enter. When done regularly, the tea ceremony becomes a way to clear emotional residue before it builds into resentment or fatigue. It becomes a time when nothing is expected of you except presence. You don't have to explain your feelings. You don't have to solve them. You just have to be with them, holding the bowl, sipping slowly, breathing quietly. In this stillness, clarity often arises, not as dramatic insight, not as a solution, but as a quiet understanding that you are safe in your own company. That healing is not always loud or visible, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is treat a small act with great care. That care extends inward. As you treat the tools with respect, you begin to treat yourself with more respect. You slow your inner pace. You stop demanding that every moment produce a result. You learn to sit with what is. This changes how you move through the rest of your life. You begin to carry the quality of the tea ceremony with you, into your work, into your relationships, into how you eat, how you rest. You begin to see that every action can be a ritual if you meet it with presence. The tea ceremony also teaches consistency. It is not dramatic. It doesn't change much from day to day, and that's part of its strength. It offers reliability in a chaotic world. You begin to trust the practice, not because it gives you a specific emotional outcome every time, but because it always brings you back to yourself. There is also an emotional honesty that arises in the stillness. When you sit quietly, without distraction, the truth of how you feel becomes clearer. If sadness is present, it will be felt. If restlessness is present, it will show itself. But because you're not trying to fix anything, these feelings lose their edge. They soften just by being allowed to exist without interruption. This is deeply healing. So much of our emotional suffering comes not from the emotions themselves, but from the way we resist them. The tea ceremony offers a new way, not by teaching you to change your feelings, but by teaching you to hold them with grace. When you learn to treat the moment with that kind of care, your emotions follow. They begin to trust you. They stop shouting. They start speaking more softly. You begin to realize that your emotions were never the enemy. They were just trying to be heard. The practice becomes a conversation between your hands and the bowl, between your breath and the steam, between your awareness and whatever is moving inside. There are no answers, but there is connection, and that connection is enough. Over time, this ritual can become a form of emotional reparenting, a way to give yourself the gentleness, the patience, the presence that may have been missing before. You learn that you don't need to be fixed. You need to be held by your own attention, your own kindness. And as this understanding deepens, you may find that your relationships shift as well. When you've practiced showing up for yourself in silence, you become better at showing up for others in silence. You stop needing to explain everything. You start listening differently. You start honoring others' emotions because you've practiced honoring your own. All of this through the simple act of making and drinking tea with presence. This is what Zen offers, not escape, but return, not avoidance, but attention, not control, but care. The tea ceremony is one of the purest expressions of this. It teaches without talking. It heals without pushing. It anchors without needing to hold on. And in this quiet space, you find yourself, not as a problem to solve, but as a presence to return to, again and again, cup by cup, breath by breath, presence by presence, until peace is no longer something you chase. It's something you pour, something you hold, something you become. The stillness of the tea ceremony teaches us how to meet emotion without fear, how to hold presence without needing to fix or change. It reminds us that healing can begin in the smallest acts, when done with full awareness. But there are times when what lives inside us needs not just to be held, but to be moved. Certain emotions, especially grief, require a different kind of space to shift. Not stillness alone, but motion. Not quiet observation, but physical expression. Grief lives in the body. Forgiveness does too, and both can be worked with, not just through meditation, but through mindful doing. This is where the garden becomes the teacher. Zen gardening is not about landscaping. It is not decoration. It is not a hobby to pass the time. It is practice. It is a way of seeing the self reflected in the soil, in the roots, in the weeds that appear when we are not paying attention. The garden holds nothing back. It responds honestly. It reveals what we often overlook in ourselves: neglect, impatience, distraction, resistance. Working in the garden is not separate from working with the heart. They are linked. As the hands meet earth, the mind meets memory. As the weeds are pulled, old pain rises, not to overwhelm, but to be seen. The physical process of tending to something alive becomes a mirror of tending to your own inner landscape. When you approach the garden with presence, each act becomes an offering. When you dig, you are unearthing what was hidden. When you prune, you are letting go of what no longer serves. When you plant, you are placing hope into the future, not as fantasy, but as commitment. Grief does not move on command. It does not obey timelines, but it does respond to attention. It loosens when the body is engaged, when the heart is grounded, when the nervous system is no longer locked in the loops of thought. Gardening offers this. You are not asked to understand your grief in order to heal. You are simply asked to show up, to move your hands, to breathe, to care. In the act of clearing soil, you meet the truth that nothing heals by being buried. Old roots must be pulled with care, not ripped, not ignored. Some take time to loosen. Some break off and must be dug out slowly. This teaches patience. It reminds you that emotions cannot be forced to leave. They must be worked with, felt, respected. Forgiveness also grows in this soil, not as a sudden decision, but as something that matures with practice. When you clear a bed for new growth, you begin to understand that holding on to resentment is like refusing to clear dead plants. It blocks light, it crowds the space, it makes it harder for new life to take root. You may notice that as you tend the garden, thoughts of old wounds surface. A memory you haven't touched in years. A moment of betrayal. A missed goodbye. These thoughts are not distractions. They are part of the process. The garden gives you the quiet permission to feel what is still unresolved, without needing to analyze or fix. You don't have to speak your pain aloud. You can let the soil hear it. As you work, your body becomes part of the ritual. The repetitive motion of raking, digging, watering, these are not chores. They are rhythmic movements that allow emotion to process without pressure. The body moves what the mind cannot. The act of kneeling becomes a form of humility. You lower yourself to the ground, not in defeat, but in service. To the earth, to the process, to your own healing. The elements in the garden also play their role. The wind teaches release. The rain teaches renewal. The sun teaches consistency. Each condition carries a message, if you listen. Some days, progress is slow. Some seasons, nothing blooms. But the garden does not quit. It waits. It adapts. It keeps going. This is what grief requires too. Not a fix, but a rhythm. Not a cure, but care. The garden becomes a teacher in how to live with loss, not by forgetting, but by integrating. You don't erase what was, you compost it. You turn it into something that can nourish the next chapter. Not in theory, in action. Forgiveness in this space becomes less about the other person. It becomes more about what you are willing to carry, more about what you are willing to release. When you loosen your grip on the story of what they did, when you place that story into the earth with your hands, you create space for something else to grow. A quiet freedom, a soft breath, a small peace. Gardening. In silence deepens this process. Without words, the senses heighten. You notice the way the soil smells after rain. You feel the tension release in your shoulders as you rake. You hear the sound of birds returning, of bees visiting flowers. These are not background details. They are reminders that life continues, that beauty is still possible, that even in the presence of pain, there is still life unfolding. Working the land also connects you to lineage, to those who came before you and found peace in the rhythm of earthwork, to ancestors who survived hardship and still planted seeds, to traditions that honored the seasons instead of resisting them. When you kneel to tend the ground, you are not alone. You join a long line of those who chose healing through presence, through action, through earth. You may find yourself speaking quietly to the plants, not as a ritual, but as instinct. You tell them what you're letting go of. You name the person you are forgiving. You say what you wish you could say out loud. The plants don't respond in words, but they hold the space. They accept the offering, and sometimes that is enough. The act of growing something is deeply vulnerable. There are no guarantees. You cannot control the weather, the pests, the timing. All you can do is prepare the soil, offer your care, and trust. This trust, over time, becomes a foundation for emotional resilience. You begin to see that effort is never wasted, even if the results are slow. Some of the most healing moments come not during the most beautiful blooms, but during the smallest signs of life. A tiny sprout, a shift in color, a new leaf where you thought nothing would grow. These are the subtle signs that something inside you is also changing, that forgiveness is taking root, that grief is no longer in control. You start to live differently. You become more attuned to process, less obsessed with outcome. You start to treat your emotions with the same care you give the garden, not as problems to fix, but as cycles to tend. Some days are for planting, some are for pruning, some are for resting. All of them matter. You may begin to share this space with others. Inviting someone into your garden is an act of vulnerability. It says, "This is where I am healing. This is what I am working on." Without having to explain everything, your actions speak for you. The garden becomes a bridge between pain and peace, between silence and connection. Even if you don't have land, you can create a version of this practice. A small pot on a windowsill, a few herbs on a balcony. The scale does not matter. What matters is the presence you bring. What matters is the rhythm you create. What matters is that you let your hands do the work your heart has been afraid to start. Grief will return. It comes in waves. But when you've built a practice of returning to the earth, you have a place to meet it. A space where it can move through you instead of settling inside. And each time you return, the process gets clearer. Not easier, but more familiar. You know what to do with the heaviness. You know how to tend to the ache. Forgiveness, too, may take time. You may need to pull the same route more than once. You may think you've let go, only to find new bitterness sprouting later. This is normal. The garden teaches that weeding is ongoing, but it also teaches that each time you return, the soil becomes softer, the roots come up more easily, the space becomes more open. Over time, what once felt heavy becomes manageable. What once felt impossible begins to shift, and you begin to feel more at home in your own experience. Not because the pain is gone, but because you've found a way to be with it that brings peace. This is the gift of Zen gardening. It is not therapy in the modern sense. It is deeper. It is physical prayer. It is emotional renewal disguised as daily practice. It is presence in motion. It is where grief and forgiveness meet, not as ideas, but as lived truth. Hands in the earth, breath in the body, heart a little more open than before, and every small act done with care becomes a way back to wholeness. No need to rush, just return, day by day, seed by seed, until you begin to trust that healing, like the garden, always knows the way. As the garden softens your hands and teaches you the slow rhythm of restoration, a deeper lesson begins to emerge. One that is not tied to the visible, not carried in the leaves or soil, not found in form at all. Beneath the layers of effort and ritual, beneath even the tenderness of grief and the hard-earned space of forgiveness, lies something quieter. Not a tool, not a technique, a space, a presence, a wordless truth. In Zen, it is called Mu. Mu is not a concept to understand. It is not a philosophy to memorize. It is not an answer, though it begins with a question. Mu is the koan that breaks through the story of self. It is the gate that leads into the unknown, the silence that holds all things, the space where identity and pain lose their outlines. It is nothing. But not in the empty, hopeless way we often fear. It is nothing in the most generous way. No resistance, no holding, no past, no problem. And it is here, in this nothingness, that true forgiveness begins. Forgiveness is often taught as a decision, something you give, a task to complete. But when you sit deeply in the presence of Mu, you begin to see that forgiveness isn't something you do. It's something that arises naturally when you stop clinging, when the self that was injured softens, when the story of the pain loses its edges. What's left is not denial. It's space, clear, open, free. Mu is a gate koan. When a student asks whether a dog has Buddha nature, the teacher replies, Mu. This word means no, but not in a literal sense. It means no fixed answer, no duality, no attachment to the question. It is a response that collapses logic and demands presence. When you bring this same approach to forgiveness, everything changes. You stop asking, should I forgive, or do they deserve it? These are questions that the mind loves, but the heart cannot answer. Mu cuts through them, not with explanation, but with presence. It says, drop the story, drop the answer, just sit. And in that sitting, the grip begins to loosen. To practice Mu is not to escape. It is to go deeper, into the place where language can't reach, into the original space before pain was labeled, before self and other were divided, before blame and defense were built. It is not forgetting. It is remembering what you are beneath the injury. When you enter Mu with sincerity, your sense of identity begins to shift. The one who was hurt and the one who caused hurt both dissolve. What remains is not confusion. It is clarity without form, peace without a reason, forgiveness without a story. This is why Mu cannot be explained. It must be experienced. You begin by sitting, by breathing, by repeating the koan in your heart, not trying to understand it, but letting it become your breath. Every time your mind returns to the wound, what they did, how it felt, why it's still unfair, you return to Mu, not to escape, but to be with the rawness without getting tangled. Over time, this creates space. Space is not passive. It is where transformation begins. In that space, you begin to see that much of your pain is not from the moment of injury, but from the replaying, the defending, the retelling. Mu breaks that loop. It stops the cycle, not by fixing the pain, but by pulling you into the presence beyond it. This presence is not numb. It feels everything, but it does not attach. It does not make meaning out of suffering. It allows suffering to rise, crest, and fall like a wave. Nothing is held. Nothing is rejected. All is allowed, but nothing sticks. Forgiveness in this context is not about the other. It's not even about you in the usual sense. It's about the release of separation. When there is no longer a tight self defending against a tight other, there is room, and in that room, grace appears. This does not mean boundaries disappear. You still live, speak, act, but you do so from clarity, not from a wounded identity. You do not react to protect a self that's been built around injury. You respond from stillness, from center, from Mu. Mu is not a thing. It is the absence of thingness, the space between thoughts, the silence before speech, the pause before action. It is the root of all Zen practice, not a place you go, but the presence you uncover when everything else falls away. When you sit with Mu, forgiveness is not a project. It is a byproduct. It grows in the soil of presence, slowly, gently, quietly. You may not even notice at first, but one day you'll feel it. The memory will return, but the tightness won't. The name will appear, but the story won't grab you. You will feel the ache, but not the identity. That is deep forgiveness, not because you willed it, but because Mu worked through you. This experience is different from conventional spiritual bypassing. It does not avoid pain. It does not mask resentment with false calm. It meets the pain completely, but without identity, without judgment. You are not the pain. You are not the healer. You are simply here, as awareness, as breath, as Mu. This kind of forgiveness leaves no trace, no scar, not because the past didn't happen, but because it is no longer happening. It has lost its power to shape who you are. The weight is gone, not because it was lifted, but because you stopped carrying it. When you enter Mu, everything becomes lighter, even grief, even betrayal. They remain, but they no longer define. You stop needing to be the one who was hurt. You stop needing to protect your version of events. You stop needing to explain yourself. You begin to live from the silence underneath all explanations. This is a kind of healing that words cannot describe. It is not emotional closure. It is spiritual openness. It is not resolution. It is return to what you were before the story began. Even in daily life, Mu can be practiced. When anger rises, pause. When resentment speaks, listen without obeying. When you feel the old pattern pulling you, say Mu, not aloud, but inwardly. as a reminder, as a return. This return becomes your practice, again and again. Not to force change, but to meet what is real. In time, you begin to see that forgiveness is not a gift you give. It is the natural result of no longer identifying with pain. It is not moral, it is spacious. You may still remember what happened. You may still choose to walk away, set boundaries, protect yourself. But you no longer carry the burden. You no longer tighten around the wound. You no longer define yourself by what was done to you. This freedom cannot be taught in steps. It cannot be planned. But it can be trusted. Each time you enter Mu, you strengthen the part of you that is already whole, the part that was never touched by trauma, the part that existed before hurt. This part is not a fantasy. It is not an ideal. It is what you are when nothing else is added. It is the ground of your being. And in that ground, forgiveness is not a task. It is a way of being. You move from reaction to response, from holding to releasing, from separation to inclusion. You begin to see the pain of others, even those who hurt you, with clearer eyes, not to excuse, but to understand, not to justify, but to see. And in that seeing, something softens, not because it should, because it can. This is what Mu offers, not a solution, not a technique, a return to emptiness that is not empty, to silence that is full, to nothingness that holds everything. Here you are free, not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. In this space, you forgive, not because it's the right thing, not because someone told you to, not even because you wanted to. You forgive because there is nothing left to protect, no one left to defend, no story left to maintain, only breath, only presence, only Mu. After the stillness of Mu has shown you that forgiveness is not a transaction but a natural outcome of spacious awareness, there remains a calling for deeper integration. Knowing that you are not the pain, that you are not the one who must carry the weight of the past, is powerful. But to live from that knowing, to let it sink from the mind into the bones, the heart, the breath, you need time. Not time filled with more doing or learning, but time held in pure presence. Not occasional stillness, but extended silence. This is where monastic silence becomes not just useful, but essential. The silence of a Zen monastery is not simply the absence of talking. It is structured, it is deliberate, it is filled with discipline and care. And within its stillness is a kind of listening most people never experience in ordinary life. A silence that listens for you, that shows you what you didn't know you were avoiding. This kind of silence does not numb, it reveals, and the revelations are not always comfortable, but they are always healing. You don't need to travel to a monastery to experience this. With sincerity and intention, you can create a 3-day home retreat that brings the same depth. The key is not perfection. It is commitment. You are not recreating a monastery's outer appearance. You are recreating its inner purpose, a space where nothing distracts you from yourself. To begin, you prepare the space where you will stay for 3 days. You remove anything that pulls your mind into noise. This includes devices, social media, entertainment, and unnecessary conversation. You clean the space, not for aesthetics, but to create internal clarity. The external mess often reflects internal confusion. Clearing the space is the first act of retreat. It signals to the nervous system that something different is beginning. You do not need elaborate tools. A cushion, a notebook, a simple altar or candle. These are enough. What matters most is intention. You are here to listen, to stop chasing, to let your awareness settle without forcing insight, to let truth surface on its own. You set a schedule, not rigid, but clear. Wake at the same time each day. Begin with sitting. Sit without expectation. Just breathe. Let thoughts come and go. The mind will resist. It will flood you with discomfort, plans, memories. That's natural. You don't need to fix it. You just return. Breath after breath. You move from sitting into walking meditation. Slowly, not as exercise, as presence in motion. Feel your feet on the ground. Let your awareness drop out of the head and into the body. There's no goal. You are not going anywhere. You are learning to be where you are, step by step. Eat simply. Cook with mindfulness. When you eat, just eat. No books, no screens. Notice each bite. Notice the urge to rush. Notice the sensations that come up. Digestion is not just physical. You are digesting emotional residue as well. Meals become part of the healing process. During the day, you intersperse silence with simple physical activity. Sweep the floor, wash the dishes, tend to plants. Move the body in gentle, mindful ways. Do not multitask. Do not speed. Each act becomes meditation. Each moment becomes your teacher. There is nowhere else to be. Journaling can be included, but not constantly. Write only when something arises that needs to be expressed. This is not an intellectual exercise. It is a release. Let the words come from the body, not the mind. What surfaces may surprise you? Memories, long buried, may rise. Emotions may swell without a clear reason. Let them move through. Do not judge. Silence reveals what noise keeps hidden. You may begin to notice how often your mind narrates, complains, rehearses conversations. In silence, these habits become obvious. This awareness alone begins the healing. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices them, and when they are seen clearly, they lose their grip. Each evening, you return to sitting. Let the day dissolve. Do not review it. Just sit. Let stillness have the last word. End with gratitude, not as a performance, but as a recognition. Gratitude for the chance to meet yourself without distraction. Gratitude for the breath, for the body, for the quiet that is always there beneath the noise. You sleep early. You keep lights dim. You reduce stimulation. You treat rest as part of the practice. In silence, sleep deepens. The nervous system recalibrates. Emotional tension begins to melt, not because you forced it, but because you stopped feeding it. By the second day, the silence may become difficult. Restlessness may grow. Old emotions may surface more intensely. This is not a sign of failure. It is progress. The system is clearing. Stay with it. Let the discomfort come. Sit with it. Walk with it. Breathe with it. You are not trying to fix anything. You are simply making space. On the third day, a shift may occur. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. A settling, a quiet clarity. You may find that you no longer need answers to your questions, that the urge to react has faded, that the emotional charge of old pain has softened, not disappeared, but no longer in control. This is the medicine of silence. It does not erase anything. It allows everything to be seen without attachment. It teaches you to trust what arises and then let it go. Not with force, with breath. The healing that happens in these 3 days is not always visible. You may not emerge with great insight, but you will feel different, lighter, clearer, more open, and that openness is where healing continues long after the silence ends. Integrating this into your life doesn't mean staying silent forever. It means carrying the quality of that silence into speech, into action, into conflict, into the rush of everyday life. You begin to speak more slowly. You listen more fully. You no longer fill space with noise. You begin to choose your words with care. You begin to feel the weight of stillness behind each movement. Monastic silence is not withdrawal. It is a deep returning to yourself, to what matters, to what was never broken, only buried under noise. The pain we carry often feels endless because we never stop long enough to face it without flinching. In silence, you finally do. You meet what's there. And in the meeting, something shifts. You learn that the heart doesn't need fixing. It needs space to unfold. A 3-day home retreat is not about becoming a monk. It is about remembering that healing doesn't require escape. It only requires intention, structure, stillness, and the willingness to sit quietly with what is real. From this place, forgiveness becomes easier. Clarity arises without effort. Emotional wounds begin to close, not from pushing, but from resting, deeply, consistently, gently. And when you emerge, the world may look the same, but you are different, because now you know where to return. You know the silence that heals. You know how to find your way back, whenever the noise returns, whenever the pain rises, whenever you forget. You just stop. You sit. You breathe. And you remember that healing is never far. It is here, in the quiet, waiting, always. As you return from the depth of silence, the stillness you cultivated lingers in the body. But you may also begin to notice something else. Beneath the quiet, below the mind's stories, and even under the softness of stillness, there remains a residue, an echo that doesn't vanish with insight or rest. It is stored in the chest, the shoulders, the belly, the throat. It is held in the breath. This is where the deepest healing must go next, not through thoughts, not even through silence, but through breath. Zen does not separate the body from the mind or the breath from the heart. All are expressions of the same life. Where the mind clings, the body tightens. Where the heart aches, the breath contracts. Trauma, grief, anger, these do not only live in memory. They live in posture, in how you breathe, in the tension you carry without realizing it. This is where breathwork becomes not just useful, but essential. Not just as a tool for relaxation, but as a practice for emotional release. Zen-inspired pranayama is simple but powerful. It requires no belief, no advanced technique, only attention and willingness. It does not force anything. It meets the body where it is and works from there. Through breath, you begin to loosen the inner spaces where emotion hides. You begin to give shape to what had no words. You start to feel again, safely, fully, completely. You begin with awareness. You sit or lie down in a quiet space. You place your hands on the body, perhaps on the stomach or the chest. You breathe without changing anything. You notice. How deep is the breath? Where does it stop? Is there space beneath the ribs? Is the inhale tight? Is the exhale short? You don't judge, you simply observe. This alone is healing. Most people are disconnected from their breath. They do not realize how shallow it has become, how much emotion it has locked inside. By returning attention to the breath, you begin to reconnect the body to the moment. This is the first step in release. Then, gently, you start to extend the exhale. Not forcefully, just enough to create space. A longer exhale tells the nervous system it's okay to soften. It begins to lower the internal alarm. It shifts you from holding to releasing. This prepares the body to access what has been stored inside, safely. With each cycle of breath, you focus not on control, but on sensation. You may feel tightness arise. Sadness may come with no story. You may feel warmth in the chest or pressure in the throat. These are signs that the breath is reaching places your awareness had not gone before. You do not analyze. You stay with sensation. You breathe into it, not imagining air going there, but allowing awareness to settle into the place where discomfort lives. The breath carries attention. Attention carries safety, and safety allows release. Sometimes emotion will rise. Tears may come, shaking, heat. These are all signs that the body is letting go, not through force, but because you finally stopped resisting what needed to move. The breath creates the conditions. The body does the rest. One of the core practices in Zen breathwork for emotional healing is the simple method of box breathing. Equal inhale, hold, exhale, hold. For example, inhale for 4 counts, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. This rhythm brings balance. It steadies the system. It becomes an anchor. It is especially helpful when emotions feel overwhelming. It creates a safe container for expression. Another practice is deep belly breathing, where you focus on expanding the abdomen fully on the inhale and gently pressing the air out on the exhale. Many emotional wounds contract the belly, whether from fear, shame, or grief. Reclaiming breath in this area brings power and clarity. You begin to feel grounded, supported from within. In Zen, breath is not separate from awareness. Each inhale is a beginning. Each exhale is a letting go. You can apply this directly to emotional processing. On the inhale, you welcome what is. On the exhale, you release what no longer needs to stay. You repeat this over and over until the emotional landscape begins to shift. There is also the practice of focused exhalation. This is used when releasing more intense stored emotions, such as rage or deep grief. You inhale slowly and exhale with a sound, maybe a sigh, maybe a low hum, maybe a whispered vowel like ah or This activates the vagus nerve, which calms the entire system and allows deeper emotion to surface without becoming too intense. These sounds are not vocal performance. They are vibrational medicine. The vibration moves energy. It breaks up the rigidity inside. It clears blocks that may have existed for years. Even the jaw, often tight from holding back expression, begins to soften. The breath also brings awareness to places we often disconnect from. The hips, the lower back, the neck. These areas hold memories. The breath doesn't need to remember the story. It simply needs to be present with the feeling. As you breathe into these spaces, you begin to trust the body's wisdom. You stop needing to explain. You start letting the body speak in its own language. Over time, the breath teaches you how to stay. When pain arises, instead of bracing or running, you breathe. This simple act, staying, reverses years of emotional habit. It sends a message to the inner world. We can feel this now. We are not in danger. We can open. This creates a new relationship with pain, not as enemy, not as failure, but as part of the process. You learn to breathe with it, not against it. You learn to hold it without collapsing. You learn to meet it without fear. Zen teaches that the breath is not just air. It is life itself. It is awareness moving through form. When you breathe consciously, you return to this truth. You stop being the story. You become the awareness underneath. And in that space, healing happens naturally. You can create a breathwork routine that fits your life. Begin in the morning with 10 minutes of intentional breathing. Begin your day not with thinking, but with feeling. Let the breath set the tone. Then, throughout the day, check in. How are you breathing now? Is it shallow? Is it fast? Return to the body, adjust, reset. Before sleep, use breath to release the emotional accumulation of the day. Deep inhales through the nose. Long, steady exhales through the mouth. You may pair this with a phrase like, "Let it go," or "This is enough." Over time, this becomes a ritual of emotional hygiene. In moments of emotional challenge, conflict, disappointment, old triggers, your breath becomes your companion. You pause, you breathe, you choose presence over reaction. This is not always easy, but it changes everything. It interrupts the cycle. It creates space between emotion and action. There is also the possibility of using breath in a deeper ceremonial way. You can set aside an hour each week for intentional emotional release. You sit, breathe, and allow what wants to arise to come forward. You let the breath guide you. You do not plan the session. You surrender to the intelligence of the breath. Sometimes it brings peace. Sometimes it brings intensity. But always it brings truth. And truth, met with compassion, always brings freedom. The beauty of Zen breathwork is that it is always accessible. No equipment is needed, no special training, just willingness, just time, just honesty. And in return, it gives you access to the deepest layers of healing, the layers thought cannot reach. Emotional scars are not removed through effort. They are softened through presence. The breath becomes the bridge between the past and the present, between pain and peace, between the person who survived and the person who is ready to live fully again. When you breathe consciously, you begin to trust the body. You begin to feel safe in yourself. You stop waiting for someone else to bring healing. You realize it is already here, within each inhale, within each exhale. You begin to breathe not just to survive, but to return to your body, to the moment, to the you that exists beyond the wound. And in that return, nothing is forced. Everything is possible. Once the breath begins to touch the spaces that memory buried and silence could not reach, you may notice a subtle longing. Not just to sit with what you feel, but to move with it. To let the emotions that surfaced through breath now find expression in rhythm. Stillness has done its work. Now it is time to walk, not to escape, but to carry forward the healing already begun. Not to forget the past, but to give it space to move through the body, step by step. This is where the practice of kinhin, or mindful walking, becomes essential. Not as exercise, not as distraction, but as ritual. A path to integrate everything you've uncovered through silence and breath. Kinhin is a Zen form of walking meditation that brings your full presence into every step. It is not hurried or casual. It is precise, grounded, intentional. You do not walk to get anywhere. You walk to be exactly where you are, with every part of you, your thoughts, your breath, your pain, your strength, all walking together. Each step becomes a small act of reconciliation, a meeting between the past and the present, a moment where memory is not something to avoid, but something to carry, lightly, without resistance. Old betrayals often stay lodged in the body because they never had a place to move. Sitting still can begin the release. Breathing can soften the walls, but walking allows the emotion to find a rhythm, to be digested, not in the mind, but in the body's natural intelligence. In kinhin, you begin by standing still. You feel both feet on the floor or on the earth, if outside. You allow your attention to settle low in your legs, your feet, your breath. Your hands form a gentle shape, usually placed against the chest or lower belly, depending on the tradition. The arms rest without tension. The gaze is soft, not fixed, but present. When you begin walking, the pace is slow, often only a half step per breath. One foot lifts, the body shifts, the heel touches down, the weight transfers, then the next. You do not rush, you do not sway, you do not plan your destination. The only goal is presence. The only posture is openness. As you walk, you allow thoughts to arise and fall away. You don't chase them. You notice them like you notice a breeze. You bring your attention back to the sensation of each step, the shift of balance, the quiet stretch of muscles, the sound of your foot meeting the surface. What makes this practice healing is that it holds everything without needing to fix anything. If a memory comes, you walk with it. If a wave of sadness rises, you breathe and continue. You do not stop walking to solve it. You keep moving with care. This movement is not escape, it is transformation. Many old emotional wounds fester because they were held still, stuck in the same place in the body, the same loop in the mind. Kinhin does not suppress them. It gives them space to move. And when movement happens with full awareness, something begins to shift. The emotional charge begins to release, not all at once, but gradually, step by step. There is no need for dramatic catharsis. Healing here is subtle. You may not even notice it in the moment, but over time, you find that a wound you've carried for years no longer grips you the same way. The sharpness fades, the weight lightens. You've metabolized it, not by analyzing, but by walking with it, slowly, mindfully. You can make this practice part of your daily rhythm. Even 5 or 10 minutes of Kinhin each day begins to reset how your nervous system relates to emotional pain. It becomes a gentle ritual, a way of checking in with yourself, of allowing the past to move through rather than build up. In moments when you feel overwhelmed, Kinhin becomes a refuge, not because it takes the feeling away, but because it gives the feeling a path. You walk, not to escape, but to stay, not to fix, but to befriend. Your steps say, I'm still here, I'm still breathing, I can keep going. Walking becomes a symbol of your capacity to hold what once felt unholdable. You are no longer frozen, you are no longer spiraling, you are simply here, one step at a time, grounded, aware, open. Kinhin can be practiced indoors or outside. Both have value. Indoors offers containment and focus. Outdoors offers connection with nature, which deepens the process. Wind, sun, air, all remind the body that it is part of something larger. When you walk outside, you begin to sense how your pain is not isolated. It is part of the human experience, and being part of something greater helps soften the edge of isolation. When walking in nature, you begin to notice how everything moves in cycles. Leaves fall, water flows, light shifts. Nothing stays stuck. This reminds your body of its own capacity to flow, to release, to regenerate. You do not have to label your wounds as you walk. You do not need to name the betrayal or reframe the memory. You simply feel the energy of it as it moves in the body. Some days it may be heavy, some days light. Both are welcome. Your breath becomes the companion of each step. Inhale, step. Exhale, step. Breath and movement become one. This creates coherence in the system, an inner harmony that helps dislodge what was held in fragmentation. You are no longer scattered across timelines. You are here, now. As the body begins to trust this rhythm, deeper layers of emotion may rise. Grief, anger, even joy. You let it come. You keep walking. There is no need to pause or suppress. This is how emotion moves. This is how it leaves the body, through rhythm, presence, and patience. When your steps become consistent, you may begin to experience moments of pure awareness. No thought, no memory, just movement, just breath. These moments are not goals. They are byproducts of presence. They teach you that beneath the stories, there is stillness, and from that stillness, peace grows. Peace does not come from forgetting what happened. It comes from no longer being ruled by it. Walking mindfully allows you to face what was without letting it shape what is. You reclaim your power with every step that does not flinch. If the mind begins to wander, you bring it back, not with harshness, but with kindness. You return to the foot lifting. You return to the breath. This returning is the practice, not staying perfect, returning. You can also pair this practice with a silent phrase, repeated in rhythm with the steps. Something like, I am here, or let it go. Choose words that anchor you in the body. Let them be gentle, like whispers to the self. They do not override the emotion, they accompany it. Over time, you begin to walk through life differently, not only in the ritual of Kinhin, but in your ordinary movement. You carry more presence into each room, each conversation. You move with more care, more softness. You speak with more attention. You listen with your whole body. This is how Kinhin reshapes not only your relationship with past wounds, but your relationship with the present moment. You become more aware of how emotion moves. You stop fearing the days when grief rises. You stop rushing to fix the discomfort. You begin to trust the path, even when it feels uncertain. The physical act of walking becomes a metaphor for your inner process. You do not rush. You do not cling. You do not fight the path. You simply keep going, step by step, breath by breath. Some of the most powerful healing happens not in dramatic breakthroughs, but in the slow, faithful rhythm of daily practice. Kinhin is this kind of practice. It asks for very little, but gives everything. It teaches you that no matter how heavy the past, no matter how sharp the betrayal, you can still move forward, not by forgetting, not by pretending, but by bringing every part of yourself into this step, then the next, then the next. And in this movement, you find something sacred. You find your way back, not to how things were, but to who you are now, whole, present, walking, free. As the path of Kinhin draws you back into the present, step by steady step, the body begins to remember that it no longer has to carry what was too heavy for too long. With each breath and footfall, a deeper understanding takes shape. Healing doesn't mean returning to what was. It means learning to live gracefully with what remains. The scar, the broken trust, the choices that cannot be undone, they are still there. But now they are softer, less sharp. The question is no longer how to remove what happened. The question becomes how to live fully with imperfection and still find peace. This is where the wisdom of wabi-sabi becomes vital. Wabi-sabi is a Zen aesthetic, but it is also a way of living. It sees beauty not in perfection, but in the incomplete, the aged, the flawed. It honors the crack in the bowl, the weathered wood, the faded fabric. It teaches us that value does not vanish when something breaks. It changes, deepens, becomes more real. In emotional life, we are often taught the opposite. We are taught to idealize purity, to fear damage, to hide our flaws and resent the flaws of others. But this only creates more pain. It places impossible standards on the self and on those we love. It turns conflict into failure. It turns healing into shame. It blocks forgiveness. Wabi-sabi shows another path. It teaches that the very things we try to hide may be the most beautiful parts of us. That cracks can let in light. That time softens even the hardest shapes. That nothing stays perfect and nothing has to. When you begin to live from this truth, you stop demanding perfection from others. You stop needing them to have never hurt you. You begin to see that the people who failed you are human, shaped by their own wounds, their own limitations. This does not mean you excuse harm. It means you stop insisting that others should have been more than they were capable of being. This shift makes space for compassion, not only for them, but for yourself. You begin to see your own mistakes not as proof of your unworthiness, but as proof of your aliveness. You recognize the courage it takes to grow at all. You forgive yourself, not because you are blameless, but because you are learning, because even your missteps are part of your unfolding. Wabi-sabi embraces transience. It knows that nothing stays. People leave, feelings change, bodies age. It is not tragic. It is natural. Trying to hold on tightly to what must evolve only leads to suffering. But when you begin to relax into impermanence, you find peace. You stop trying to freeze moments. You let them pass. You let life move. Forgiveness becomes possible when you stop insisting that what hurt you should never have happened, that your story should have been cleaner, that your family, your relationships, your own heart should have followed a perfect script. None of them did. None of them will. And that's okay. This is not the same as giving up. It's giving in to life as it is, letting go of what could have been, making peace with what is. You begin to say, "This is the truth of my life, and I will live it fully, not in spite of its mess, but because of it." Wabi-sabi also shifts how we define beauty. We start to admire what is real, the face that shows time, the voice that trembles, the story that doesn't resolve neatly. We stop hiding our scars. We stop performing perfection. We start showing up as we are, and in doing so, we allow others to do the same. This creates safety, and in safety, emotional release happens. Grudges soften. Expectations melt. The tight, painful grip of judgment towards self and others begins to loosen. You might start seeing beauty in things you once rejected, in people you once resented, in parts of yourself you once disowned. You begin to hold space for contradictions, for the mother who was both loving and absent, for the partner who tried but couldn't stay, for the version of you who made mistakes because they didn't know better. This is forgiveness through wabi-sabi. It is not dramatic. It is not always loud. It unfolds quietly, gradually, like moss growing on stone, like tea stains on your favorite cup. It becomes part of your life, subtle, unpolished, and real. You can bring this into your daily space by surrounding yourself with reminders of imperfect beauty. A chipped bowl you still use with care, a wrinkled photograph you keep without cropping, a handwritten note full of smudges. Let these items become part of your practice. Let them teach you to see value in wear, grace in the incomplete. You can also begin speaking to yourself with the same tone. Instead of harsh correction, offer gentle observation. Instead of demanding improvement, offer patience. You are not a project. You are a garden, sometimes overgrown, sometimes blooming, always worth tending. Relationships begin to change when you live this way. You stop expecting people to meet every need. You allow space for misunderstanding, for disappointment, for repair. You start to prioritize presence over performance. You forgive more easily, not because pain doesn't matter, but because connection does. And when you truly forgive through wabi-sabi, it doesn't mean the wound disappears. It means the wound becomes integrated. It becomes part of your story, not something that defines you, but something that shaped you. You don't have to love the pain, but you begin to love the person you became because of what you've lived through. This allows a different kind of peace to emerge. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace of acceptance. A peace that holds everything, the joy and the sorrow, the clarity and the confusion, the right choice and the regret. You learn to stop waiting for the perfect moment to begin living. You begin now as you are, with what you have. You look around and find meaning in the uneven, the ordinary, the unfinished. Wabi-sabi teaches you that life is not found in the flawless image, but in the moment when someone shows you their cracks and lets you see inside. When someone lets you in, not at their best, but in their realness. That moment is sacred, and you begin to realize that offering your own vulnerability is not weakness. It's a gift. You don't have to be whole to be worthy. You don't have to be healed to be loved. You don't have to be perfect to offer peace. You just have to be honest, present, open. This is how forgiveness becomes natural, not a task, not a struggle, but a way of being, a soft gaze, a loosened grip, a quiet yes to the reality of things. You stop asking life to be different. You start seeing the beauty in what is. And from that vision, true emotional release begins, not as an escape, but as a homecoming. To the version of you who tried, to the ones who failed you, to the world that hurt and healed and carried you all at once. Wabi-sabi does not fix, it honors, and in that honoring, it frees. Once you begin to see beauty in imperfection and allow forgiveness to grow from acceptance rather than resolution, another truth quietly reveals itself. Some of the pain you carry was never yours to begin with. Some wounds run deeper than personal history. They live in the background of your decisions, your relationships, your reactions, passed through silence, shaped by culture, carved into family patterns. These are not only your stories, they are echoes. They belong to generations before you. This is the realm of ancestral trauma, and Zen offers a unique path to meet it, not through the mind, but through the voice, not through conversation, but through vibration. Here, ancient chanting becomes more than ritual. It becomes a tool for transformation, a bridge between what was and what can be healed. Chanting in Zen is not about performance. It is not entertainment. It is repetition with reverence. Each syllable is intentional. Each sound is a thread that weaves the present with the past. Through the act of vocal vibration, the body becomes a conduit for release. The voice becomes a channel not only for personal prayer, but for generational cleansing. When you chant, you engage the whole system: breath, sound, body, memory. This full engagement makes it possible to access patterns that were buried not by you, but before you. Patterns of fear, of silence, of shame. Energies passed from parents to children, unspoken but deeply felt. Chanting does not require you to know the full story. You don't need detailed knowledge of your family's past. The work happens on another level. Sound works in the places words cannot reach. The vibration of chanting moves through the chest, the gut, the jaw, the exact places where emotional memory is stored. These are the same spaces that carry the tension of stories never spoken. You begin with one chant, a simple phrase repeated with sincerity. It may be in Pali, Sanskrit, or Japanese. The words themselves are less important than the devotion behind them. You choose one that resonates. Something ancient, something steady. Then you sit, you breathe, and you begin. At first, the voice may feel small, uncertain, but as you continue, the sound deepens. You feel it resonate in the bones, in the spine. Over time, the vibration moves emotion. You may feel warmth, shaking, tears. You may hear your own voice in a way that feels unfamiliar, more honest, more raw. This is the sound of something moving through you, something leaving that never belonged. Zen chants are often repeated many times. This repetition is not mindless. It creates rhythm. Rhythm helps the nervous system regulate. It settles the chaos inherited from generations of fear. It calms the patterns of reactivity that were modeled by those who came before you. You begin to understand how much of your emotional life has been shaped by people you never met. This understanding doesn't come through analysis. It comes through direct experience. As you chant, insights may arise, not always as thoughts, but as feelings, memories, realizations. You start to notice where your pain matches someone else's in your family. You see the same patterns repeated, and in this seeing, something opens. Not blame, not guilt, just truth. Gentle, honest truth. That truth brings freedom, because when you recognize that some of your emotional weight is inherited, you also realize that you can stop passing it on. You don't have to continue the cycle. You can become the point where it ends. Not by force, but by presence. Not by rejecting the past, but by honoring it and letting it go. Chanting helps this letting go because it bypasses the mind's defenses. The rational mind may resist change, but the voice does not lie. It carries energy out of the body. It breaks through the frozen places. It returns breath where there was holding. When practiced regularly, chanting becomes a kind of spiritual cleansing. You begin to feel lighter, more grounded. Relationships shift. Reactions change. You stop echoing the wounds of those before you and start creating new responses, ones based on awareness rather than repetition. You can incorporate chanting into your daily practice. Even 5 minutes in the morning can shift the tone of your day. It centers you, it connects you to something older than your pain, and it gives you the strength to show up differently in your life. To go deeper, you can create a small ritual dedicated to ancestral healing. You light a candle, place a photo or symbol of your lineage nearby, and begin chanting with the intention to heal not just yourself, but those who came before and those who will come after. This intention expands the impact of your practice. It becomes a gift not only for you, but for everyone connected to you through blood or care. Zen does not ask you to fix your ancestors. It invites you to liberate yourself from what they could not release. You do this not by erasing them, but by transforming the energy they left behind. Chanting becomes the offering. Your voice becomes the vehicle. Some chants focus on compassion, some on wisdom, some on purification. Choose one that resonates with what you need. Trust the sound. Let it guide you. Let it teach you how to feel what was never spoken. Let it move what was never fully felt. As your chanting deepens, your awareness of interconnection grows. You stop seeing yourself as separate. You realize your healing is not isolated. Every time you release a piece of old pain, you open space in the collective field. Others benefit, even those you've never met, even those who hurt you. This is not abstract. It is real. Emotional energy moves through systems, families, communities, lineages. When you clear something, the system reorganizes. The next generation inherits less weight. You become a link of clarity in a long chain of history. Over time, the act of chanting becomes less about pain and more about peace. You no longer chant only to release. You chant to celebrate, to honor the life you've reclaimed, to offer gratitude to those who struggled before you made this possible, to bless those still finding their way. And in this ongoing practice, your voice changes. It becomes fuller, more grounded, more resonant. Not because you're singing, because you're speaking truth. Because your body is no longer holding so much. Because you are no longer afraid of what might come up. You learn to trust the sound, to trust the silence between the sounds. You begin to feel that every chant is an act of love. Love for the self, love for the ones who suffered, love for the world that continues to change. Healing ancestral trauma through chanting does not erase the past. It frees you from being trapped by it. It allows the memory to live without defining you. It transforms heaviness into wisdom, suffering into song, separation into connection. And the most beautiful part is this. You don't need to understand it all for it to work. You just need to begin. One breath, one phrase, one sound at a time. Until the voice becomes strong, until the heart becomes open, until the past can rest and you can live. As the voice clears, inherited weight through chanting, and the body feels lighter from the echoes it no longer carries, there often remains one final trace, something faint but persistent, a residue that doesn't live in the throat or the chest, but in the quiet corners of the mind. Thoughts unspoken, words unsent, feelings half-formed. These remnants do not dissolve with movement or breath. They need something else, a shape, a line, a form to hold them, even briefly, before they are let go. This is where Zen calligraphy becomes a practice of closure, not as art to admire, but as a sacred act of release. A brush, ink, paper, simple tools that become powerful vessels for pain, truth, memory, and transformation. Through writing, brushing, and letting go, we give form to what has no name and create space for something new to begin. In Zen, calligraphy is not about aesthetics. It is not about skill. It is about presence. Every stroke reflects the quality of attention. Every mark reveals the state of the heart. There is no correcting, no editing. What appears on the page is accepted as it is. This is what makes it a healing ritual. You begin not by choosing the right words, but by slowing down, preparing the space with intention, clearing distractions, centering the breath. You sit in silence until the body becomes still and the mind begins to quiet. The ink is prepared. The brush is held with respect. The paper becomes a mirror, not of perfection, but of the unspoken. What you write does not have to be beautiful. It does not even have to be legible. It only needs to be true. You might write a name, a memory, a phrase that lingers. You might write a word you never had the chance to say. You might write something you've told yourself 1,000 times, but never put into the world. The act of writing externalizes what the heart has carried. It turns pain into ink. It takes the formless and makes it visible. This is the first step in releasing it, not through denial, but through honoring. After writing comes the brush. Using traditional calligraphy tools is ideal, but not required. Any brush held with care becomes part of the ritual. You dip it into ink and bring it to the page. Here, movement matters more than meaning. The brush dances or presses, swirls or strikes. It follows your breath. It expresses what the voice cannot. You may choose a character that carries significance. In Zen, single characters like mu, nothingness, I, love, or ko, light, hold profound depth. You can repeat a stroke again and again, not for beauty, for truth. Each brushstroke becomes a declaration. I see this, I feel this, I let this move through me. The texture of the ink, the resistance of the paper, the sound of the bristles, all of it becomes part of the ritual. You are not just writing, you are participating in the act of transforming emotion into form. The act itself is enough. No one needs to see what you create. It is not for judgment. It is not for display. It is for closure. Closure does not always come through understanding. It often comes through embodiment. The hand moving with intention, the ink drying as breath steadies, the brush being cleaned after use. These actions tell the body, this is complete. This is no longer inside. This has been given a place. And then the final step, the burn. This part of the ritual is done with care, with reverence. You do not burn out of anger. You burn to release. You take what you have written or brushed, fold it gently, and bring it to flame. You watch the ink turn to smoke, the paper curl into ash. This is not destruction. It is transformation. As the paper burns, so does the weight you placed into it. You let it go physically, not metaphorically. You witness its end. Not to erase the memory, but to mark the turning point. To say, I have carried this long enough. I have seen it. I have honored it. I now release it. The fire becomes sacred, not wild, not rushed, controlled and calm. It becomes part of the closure, part of the return to the present. This ritual can be repeated as needed. There is no limit to what can be written and released. Every moment of unresolved tension, every unsaid word, every lingering story, each one has a place on the page. Each one has a right to be honored, and each one, once honored, can be set free. You may begin to make this part of your regular practice, weekly, monthly, during times of transition or emotional heaviness. It becomes a way to stay clear, a way to process instead of store, a way to move through emotion instead of around it. Over time, the relationship to writing changes. It becomes less about expression and more about presence. You begin to feel when something needs to be written, even before the mind fully names it. The hand moves before the thought forms. The body knows when it's time to release. This intuitive relationship with ritual builds trust in yourself. You learn that you can face what arises without being overwhelmed, that you have the tools to meet emotion with care, to give it form, and to let it go. Calligraphy becomes your companion. The brush becomes your ally. The page becomes your confessional, and the fire becomes your final act of love. You do not rush these rituals. You allow space. You allow feeling. You let the process unfold, not as performance, as healing. And in the space left behind, after the ink, after the burn, there is something else. Silence, lightness, peace, a sense that something important has been completed, that what needed to be seen was seen, that what needed to be honored has been given its place. This peace is not loud. It doesn't shout. It settles in the heart like warm air. It reminds you that closure is not forgetting. It is seeing clearly, feeling fully, and then choosing to move forward. Zen teaches us that every stroke of the brush carries the whole of who you are in that moment. You don't need to wait until you feel ready. you simply begin, as you are, with what is present, and you let the ritual do its work. Over time, you may look back on these moments, not with pain, but with gratitude, for the time you sat, wrote, breathed, burned, for the courage to face what was inside, for the beauty of releasing with your own hands. This is the Zen calligraphy of closure, a practice that honors the past without holding it, a ritual that clears the heart, a doorway that leads not back but forward, toward space, toward peace, toward renewal. One page, one brush, one flame, and everything begins again. After releasing old stories through ink and fire, after turning emotion into motion and allowing the body to witness its own freedom, something quieter arrives. Not a thought, not a feeling, just a natural slowing down, a soft fade into stillness that no longer feels like avoidance, but like rest. And yet, rest itself must also be approached with care, because even sleep can be a continuation of healing if entered with awareness. This is where Zen offers another path, the practice of preparing for sleep, not as an afterthought, but as a sacred transition. In the same way that a monk bows before entering the meditation hall, the process of going to bed can become an intentional ritual, not just a time to recover, but a time to integrate, to let the body and heart absorb everything the day has stirred and settle into peace without needing resolution. Monastic sleep practices are not complex. Their power lies in consistency and presence. The day's end is seen as just as important as its beginning. How you end the day influences the quality of your rest, the texture of your dreams, and the state of your emotional body when you rise. Begin with the space. A monk's sleeping quarters are simple, free of excess. This isn't about denial, it's about minimizing what pulls attention outward. Soft lighting, clean linens, neutral colors. Every detail is a message to the nervous system. Here, you can let go. You don't need to recreate a temple. You only need to create quiet. Next is rhythm. Monks follow a steady schedule, and that rhythm itself becomes a signal for safety. When the body knows what to expect, it begins to relax. You can bring this into your life by setting a regular time to wind down, not just to fall asleep, but to begin the transition. That shift matters more than people realize. It tells the body, we are safe now, we can rest. Before bed, incorporate a cleansing ritual. This might be a shower, a warm cloth on the face, or simply washing the hands with presence. Water carries symbolism across traditions. It purifies. In Zen, it also wakes the senses gently. Even a short moment of cleansing helps mark the shift from activity to stillness. It's a physical way of letting go. Silence is part of this. Reduce input. Screens, loud voices, mental stimulation. Noise keeps the nervous system alert. Silence invites the body to listen to itself again. If you live in a noisy place, use white noise, natural sounds, or even the steady rhythm of your own breath as a gentle anchor. Lighting also plays a role. Monks rise and sleep with the sun. You may not have that freedom, but you can mimic it. Dim lights an hour before bed. Avoid bright screens. Light signals wakefulness. Darkness signals melatonin release. This isn't spiritual, it's physiological, but honoring the body's design is spiritual in itself. Now, bring the body into stillness through movement. Just 5 to 10 minutes of slow, mindful motion, gentle stretching, soft forward folds, hip openings, signals to the muscles that they're safe. Emotional energy, especially if unresolved, tends to settle in the joints and tissues. Nightly movement allows this energy to disperse without analysis. You are saying, with every motion, I am not fighting the day, I am releasing it. A seated meditation can follow. It doesn't need to be long, just enough to shift from doing to being. Sit with eyes closed, let thoughts come and go. Focus on the breath. Each inhale welcomes the day's experience. Each exhale releases what's no longer needed. You don't need to process everything. You only need to be with it. A simple practice is to review the day with neutral awareness, not judgment, just observation. Where was I present? Where did I react? What did I carry that I no longer need? This review becomes emotional digestion. Without this step, thoughts and emotions often show up in sleep in disorganized ways. With it, they integrate. Chanting can also be used here. A soft, repetitive phrase, something grounding. This helps regulate breath and invites the heart into a softer rhythm. Mantras or phrases like I release, this is enough, or all is welcome can guide the mind into surrender. Then comes the breath itself. In Zen-inspired sleep rituals, breath is not controlled, but observed. You lie down and feel each inhale expand the body and each exhale soften it. You notice where the breath is smooth and where it's tight. You don't force change, you simply witness. And in the witnessing, the breath begins to deepen naturally. A powerful technique for nighttime is 4 to 7, 8 breathing. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale slowly for 8. This rhythm helps quiet the mind and triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. It slows heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and prepares the body for true rest, not just unconsciousness, but restorative sleep. As you settle, introduce gratitude, not as a concept, but as a felt experience. Think of 1 or 2 things from the day that opened your heart, even briefly. It could be a kind word, a quiet moment, a deep breath. Let yourself feel it again. This shifts emotional focus from what went wrong to what supported you. Gratitude is not about ignoring pain. It's about creating space around it. If emotion arises during this time, you allow it. Tears before sleep are not a problem. They are a release. You do not need to explain or understand what surfaces. You meet it with breath, with stillness, with compassion. This is what emotional integration looks like, not fixing, but including. If thoughts persist, you give them shape. Keep a small notebook nearby. Write a word, a sentence, a phrase, just enough to say, I see you. You don't need to stay in my body tonight. You have a place now. Then return to the breath. You can also place one hand on the belly and one on the chest. This connects the mind to the body again. You feel the rise and fall. You become present without effort. You remind yourself that you are held, not by ideas, but by your own awareness. Before sleep, a final bow can be offered, not outward, but inward. A bow of the heart. A silent gesture of acceptance for the day, for your efforts, for your mistakes, for what was left unfinished. A bow to the moment as it is. Then you sleep. No music unless it's deeply calming. No lights unless they are soft and low. You let your breath guide you into rest. You do not try to sleep. You allow it. Over time, this process becomes a rhythm, not a strict rule, but a gentle pattern. The body learns it. The mind begins to relax earlier. Emotional processing becomes quieter. Dreams shift. You begin to wake not just rested, but integrated. What was stirred during the day has found a place during the night. What you couldn't say found breath. What was held in tension was softened in stillness. You are no longer carrying yesterday into today. These rituals do not promise perfect sleep. Life is not always peaceful, but they offer consistency. They offer support. They offer a return. Zen teaches that how you do anything is how you do everything. How you close the day reflects how you move through life. Are you rushing, avoiding, or are you willing to meet the moment, even as it ends? Sleeping like a monk means meeting the night with the same presence you bring to practice. It means letting the body do what it knows how to do: rest, recover, repair. It means trusting that peace is not the absence of effort, but the presence of care. You rise in the morning not from escape, but from integration. You begin again, steady, soft, whole. And the day ahead carries something new, not because it is perfect, but because you are finally rested enough to meet it fully. Waking up rested, clear, and emotionally lighter is not just a result of physical sleep. It's what happens when the day has been honored, the heart has been tended to, and nothing was left unacknowledged. But even when the breath has softened and the nervous system is calm, there may still be one final resistance deep inside. A clinging, a quiet refusal, not always loud, but persistent. The mind might still whisper, "Not yet, not that person, not that pain." Forgiveness, for some, still feels out of reach. At that point, Zen offers something both humbling and profound: the 5 remembrances. A teaching so simple and so honest that it cannot be debated or denied. It speaks directly to the human condition and asks you to see life as it truly is, without illusion. And in doing so, it opens the locked door to compassion, not by bypassing pain, but by placing it within the context of mortality. The 5 remembrances are reflections traditionally recited to confront the reality of impermanence. They are not meant to frighten or sadden. They are meant to clear away everything that prevents true presence. They remind us that everything we fear, resist, and grieve is part of the same cycle that includes birth, growth, decline, and death. And within that cycle, there is no space for pride, bitterness, or the fantasy of permanence. Each remembrance speaks directly to the mind's hidden attachments. The first teaches that we will grow old. Not might, will. No matter how strong or capable we are now, our bodies will change. Our strength will fade. And this includes not only ourselves, but everyone we know. This is not tragedy, it's truth. When we remember this deeply, the heart softens. We stop expecting others to be perfect. We begin to let go of resentments built on unrealistic expectations. The aging parent, the changing partner, the faltering friend, all of them are part of the same cycle. And so are we. The second remembrance teaches that sickness is part of life. Again, not a possibility, but a certainty. Physical vulnerability is not a sign of weakness. It is a condition of being human. When we see this clearly, we become less judgmental of ourselves and others. We stop blaming people for breaking down. We recognize that pain, both physical and emotional, is woven into the fabric of existence. This brings humility, and with humility comes forgiveness. The third remembrance is that we will die. This is not to be feared, but accepted. It is not meant to bring anxiety, but clarity. The knowledge of death strips away everything that doesn't matter. All the grudges, the arguments, the silent punishments we hold against others, they lose their power when seen through the lens of mortality. If you knew today was your last, who would you forgive? What would you release? These are not dramatic questions, they are practical ones. Death, when contemplated deeply, sharpens the vision. It helps us see what's real. The fourth remembrance reminds us that everything we love will change, that we cannot keep anything, not people, not possessions, not even our own identities. This is the hardest truth and the most freeing. Attachment to what must change always leads to suffering. When we accept this, we stop resisting loss and start loving more openly. We no longer punish others for not staying the same. We stop trying to hold people still. We learn to meet them where they are, not where we want them to remain. The final remembrance is that our only true belonging is in our actions, not our reputation, not our relationships, but what we do, how we live, how we show up. This one teaches responsibility. It reminds us that no matter what others have done, our own peace depends on how we respond. This remembrance empowers. It puts the key to freedom in our own hands, not through blame, but through choice. Taken together, the 5 remembrances form a lens through which all grudges, conflicts, and emotional injuries can be viewed with greater perspective. They don't erase pain, but they reframe it. They place it within a timeline that is always moving, and that movement allows forgiveness to become possible, not as an abstract ideal, but as a necessary act of compassion. Meditating on these truths daily changes the way you live. It also changes how you relate to others. You begin to speak more gently. You stop clinging to old hurts. You realize that time is not guaranteed, and connection matters more than being right. Forgiveness, when approached from this space, is not forced. It flows. It no longer depends on the other person changing. It no longer depends on apology or agreement. It becomes an offering you give because your heart has been opened by reality. You begin to see the people who hurt you as temporary beings, just like you, struggling, afraid, doing their best with what they've carried. Their actions, while not excused, are placed in a context, a wider view, and in that view, you see that punishing them in your mind only punishes yourself. This shift does not make you passive, it makes you wise. You still set boundaries, you still walk away from harm, but you do it with peace, not anger, with clarity, not revenge, with love, not illusion. The practice of the 5 remembrances can be as simple as reading them aloud each day, sitting quietly after each one, letting it land not in the mind, but in the heart. Or you can write your reflections, noticing where resistance shows up. You can ask, where am I still pretending permanence exists? Where am I still holding pain because I think there's more time to fix it later? Sometimes you may feel sadness as you sit with these truths. That is not failure. That is the beginning of letting go. The sadness shows you where you've been gripping life too tightly. The tears wash away what no longer needs to be defended. You can also extend this practice into conversation, speaking to loved ones with these truths in mind, not making speeches, just choosing words that reflect your deeper awareness, saying, "I appreciate you," instead of waiting, saying, "I forgive you," without needing a response, saying, "I see your effort even when it's imperfect." Living from remembrance is not dramatic. It's quiet. It's choosing what matters. It's letting each interaction be informed by the truth that none of this lasts. And in that truth, nothing is wasted. Every moment becomes a chance to connect, to release, to heal. Even when the wound is deep, even when the betrayal seems unforgivable, these remembrances offer a bridge. They remind you that your time is finite, that your peace is valuable, that your heart is worth protecting, not with walls, but with understanding. You begin to realize that forgiveness is not about them. It's about you. It's about laying down the burden, walking a little lighter, loving a little freer, and meeting the inevitable changes of life with a heart that is open, not because it was never hurt, but because it learned to let go. This is how Zen turns death into a teacher, not to scare, but to awaken, not to silence you, but to soften you, not to end something, but to return you to what matters most. And from that place, forgiveness is no longer a decision. It is the only thing left to do. When the truth of impermanence is fully felt, something inside loosens. The grudge that seemed justified begins to seem less important. The urgency to be right fades into a quiet desire to be at peace. And in that softening, another layer of the self begins to emerge. Not the part that holds pain against others, but the part that still aches from what it never received. A younger voice, less defended, more vulnerable. One that doesn't speak loudly, but waits to be noticed. This is the voice of the inner child. Forgiveness of others often begins with something we overlook. Forgiveness of the younger self. The self that made choices without understanding. That endured things too heavy to process. That developed defenses not out of defiance, but survival. That self doesn't need judgment or analysis. It needs presence. And in Zen, presence begins with stillness. Seated meditation becomes the space where that younger self can be seen again, not as a memory, but as a living part of the emotional body. Still there, still waiting. Zen doesn't treat this part of you as a problem. It treats it with reverence. In silence, there is room for the child within to speak without being interrupted, ignored, or pushed away. The practice begins not with effort, but with intention. You sit not to fix, but to meet. You ground the body. You find the breath. You allow the thoughts to slow, not by resisting them, but by letting them pass. You open the door to what arises naturally. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's chaotic. You sit with both. Zen teaches that the body remembers what the mind forgets. In meditation, the sensations that rise are often more honest than thoughts. A tightness in the throat, a flutter in the chest, an ache in the belly. These are not random. They are echoes. You sit and listen, not with the ears, but with attention. That attention becomes the new parenting, the nurturing that was missing. You do not need to recall every memory. You only need to respond with care to whatever surfaces. If an image arises, a moment from childhood, a face, a phrase, you acknowledge it without judgment. If emotion stirs, tears, frustration, longing, you make space for it. You breathe with it. You let it complete its arc. This is what the inner child needed all along, a steady, loving presence, not answers, not perfection, just someone to stay, someone to see them and not turn away. Meditation allows you to become that person. Each time you sit, you show the younger self, I'm here now. I won't rush past you. I won't explain you away. I won't shame you for being hurt. This relationship, built slowly over time, begins to rewrite the emotional wiring. The nervous system learns it doesn't have to stay in alert mode. The heart begins to trust again. Stillness gives this space to grow. It creates a consistent rhythm, like a safe home. The seat, the cushion, the posture, all become symbols of reliability. The mind may resist, but the body begins to know, this is where I am held. In that holding, reparenting becomes real, not through force, but through consistency. You begin to talk to yourself differently. The inner dialogue softens. The harshness loses its grip. You stop repeating the critical voices you inherited. You start to speak from kindness, not as a performance, but as your new language. One powerful meditation practice for healing the inner child is to sit with the breath and visualize the younger self nearby, watching you, sitting close. You don't need to speak. Just be there. Let them feel your presence. Let them see that you are safe now, that you are not abandoning them again. Over time, this creates deep emotional repair. Another approach is to place one hand on the heart and one on the belly as you sit. This physical gesture communicates safety. It grounds the body. It reassures the parts of you that felt unseen. You breathe deeply and remind the body, we are okay now. This is not pretending. This is creating a new baseline of emotional safety. Sometimes words may help. In meditation, you can silently repeat phrases of reassurance. Simple and true. I'm here. You didn't deserve what happened. You are safe with me. These words, offered from presence, carry more weight than any external approval. Zen emphasizes non-attachment, but this does not mean disconnection. It means seeing clearly. When you sit with your inner child, you're not clinging to the past. You're acknowledging the part of you that never stopped living inside the body. You're allowing the truth of your history to be integrated rather than hidden. Emotional pain often repeats because it was never felt in safety. Meditation creates that safety. It doesn't ask you to relive trauma. It invites you to feel what is present now with compassion. That's where healing begins, not by digging for pain, but by allowing what wants to come forward. This process also changes how you relate to others. When your inner child feels heard, you stop projecting unhealed wounds onto relationships. You no longer need others to fix what was broken. You no longer interpret every conflict as rejection. You meet others with less urgency, more grace. You also become more forgiving. You see how others carry their own inner children. You begin to notice when someone's anger is really fear, when their distance is really old pain. This doesn't mean you accept harmful behavior. It means you understand it without adding more harm. Meditation becomes the place where you reconnect with the self before the world taught you to hide. The self that still wants joy, connection, and safety. You don't have to become someone else to heal. You have to return. Stillness teaches that everything you've been searching for, approval, love, clarity, has always been inside you, covered perhaps, but not lost. Each session becomes a reunion, a returning to the parts of yourself that once had to go quiet in order to survive. And in your quiet presence now, they are welcomed back. They are reintegrated. They are no longer exiled within your own heart. You may begin to notice small shifts. You speak to yourself more kindly. You breathe more deeply in difficult moments. You no longer collapse at criticism. You begin to stand not from defense, but from self-knowing. That self-knowing comes from sitting, from staying, from choosing to be with yourself over and over again. No one else can do this for you. But once you learn how, you carry it everywhere. The seat, the breath, the inner dialogue, they go with you. You begin to parent yourself in real time, during stress, during conflict, during loneliness, and with each moment of care, the inner child heals a little more. Zen does not offer healing as a finish line. It offers it as a path, a practice, a way of living. And healing the inner child through stillness is not about fixing a broken past. It's about becoming the adult who no longer abandons the self, who shows up, who stays. And when you stay with yourself, forgiveness becomes less of an effort. It becomes your nature, because you're no longer punishing the self for being wounded. You're no longer demanding perfection before peace. You are accepting the truth of who you've been and offering love to who you are becoming. This is how meditation becomes medicine, how presence becomes parenting, how stillness becomes the most powerful form of support. Not because it changes what happened, but because it finally gives your past a place to rest. When the inner child has been seen and soothed in stillness, when your presence becomes the place of comfort you always needed, there comes a sense of quiet that feels new. Not silence from absence, but silence that holds. In that stillness, the nervous system settles. The breath slows, but even here, something faint may linger, a subtle unrest, a tightness beneath words, a feeling that something is still stuck. Not in the story, but in the body, in the places the mind cannot reach. Zen offers many doorways into healing, and one of the most overlooked is the doorway of sound. There are emotions that language cannot touch, patterns that cannot be reasoned with, wounds so deep that they no longer have a story. They have a vibration, and that vibration lives in the tissues, in the breath, in the frequency of the mind itself. This is where the sound of singing bowls becomes a bridge, not for entertainment, not for distraction, but for real release. Singing bowls, when used with presence, do more than create beautiful tones. Their frequencies interact directly with the body's own energy field. Their vibrations don't just travel through air. They move through the skin, the bones, the fascia, the nervous system. They work where logic ends, where feeling begins. Zen does not separate sound from silence. It understands them as partners. The resonance of a bowl arises from silence and returns to it. This cycle mirrors emotional integration, the rising, the vibration, the fading, just like breath, just like feeling, just like the nature of the mind itself. When you work with singing bowls, you are not adding something to yourself. You are clearing space. The sound becomes a tool for dissolving emotional residue that lingers even after conscious healing has begun. The tight chest, the racing thoughts, the restless sleep, all of these can be signs of energetic clutter. Not trauma that needs retelling, but sensation that needs moving. Begin with intention, not to fix or chase an outcome, but to open. You sit comfortably. You place the bowl where the sound can resonate around and through you. It could be in front of you, beside you, or even resting on your body if done carefully. You strike or circle the rim slowly, letting the tone swell and fade. The first thing you notice is the breath. It often deepens on its own, not from force, but from resonance. The sound invites the body to trust, to let go. You feel the tone move through you, not just hear it. It shifts internal rhythm. The heart rate, the brain waves, even digestion begin to adjust. This is not imagined, it is measured. Sound changes physiology, but more importantly, it opens space for the unseen. Memories may surface, not vividly, but emotionally. A sadness with no name, an image without detail, a feeling of lightness or grief. The sound holds all of it. It does not guide you toward meaning. It creates safety for experience to arise and pass. Each tone has its own frequency, and the body responds uniquely to different notes. Lower tones often ground, calm, and settle. Higher tones can open, lift, and energize. When used with care, the full spectrum of sound helps the whole self recalibrate. You don't direct it, you trust it. You can begin your practice with a few minutes of listening, letting the sound wash over you, breathing with it. No analysis, just reception. Over time, you begin to notice where the sound lands in the body, where it gets stuck, where it feels resisted. These are cues. The body is showing you where attention is needed. Sometimes you use the bowl not just to listen, but to tone with. You match your voice to the sound. You hum gently. You allow your own vibration to join the bowl's. This activates resonance in the throat and chest, two areas where unspoken emotion often lives. You don't have to sing. You don't have to sound good. You only have to participate. This creates a loop of healing. The bowl vibrates. Your voice responds. The body vibrates in return. Tension begins to move. Emotion begins to find exit points. You may feel heat, shivers, or spontaneous breath. These are signs of energy shifting. You are not imagining the healing. You are living it. Singing bowls can also be used in guided sequences. For example, starting with grounding tones at the base of the body, then moving upward. This pattern supports emotional flow and balance. The lower tones help release fear and anxiety. The mid-tones support grief and love. The higher frequencies help with clarity and insight. You don't have to know this mentally to benefit. The body knows. One particularly powerful practice is to use the bowl after seated meditation. Once the mind has settled and the breath has slowed, you end the silence with sound. Just a few strikes. Just enough to open the body after deep stillness. This helps integrate the practice. It bridges inner quiet with outer sensation. You can also use bowls before sleep, especially when thoughts are still circling or when emotional tension hasn't fully settled. A few minutes of tone, either played or listened to, can shift the system toward rest. It clears residual agitation and allows the mind to drift without resistance. For deeper emotional work, you may choose to focus on a particular theme: loss, forgiveness, trust. You hold the word gently in your awareness and allow the sound to meet it. You don't push, you don't visualize, you let the tone interact with the feeling. Over time, the emotional charge often changes, not because you solved it, but because you gave it space to vibrate out. Zen views sound as another form of mindfulness, not separate from breath, posture, or awareness, but equal. The bell that rings in a temple is not decoration, it is instruction. It tells the body to stop, to listen, to return. The bowl is the same. Every strike is an invitation back. Over time, this practice shifts how you hold emotion in daily life. You begin to feel when something is stuck. You sense the tightness, the dissonance, and rather than suppressing it or explaining it, you respond with vibration. You find a tone, you hum, you allow the resonance to meet the resistance. Sound teaches that not everything must be named, that some healing happens through frequency, through felt experience, through the body's own intelligence when given the right tools. Singing bowls are such a tool, not because they do the healing for you, but because they support you in accessing your own ability to feel and release. This work is subtle but powerful. You won't always walk away with insight. Sometimes the change is that you can breathe more deeply, or that your jaw finally unclenched, or that the dream you had that night was a little softer. These are not small things. These are signs of integration. Sound therapy, in a Zen context, is not about achieving a state. It's about restoring balance, not through control, but through surrender, letting the sound do what it does, letting the body receive without agenda. You begin to listen to yourself differently, to the sound of your own breath, the tone of your thoughts, the vibration of your relationships. You become more attuned, less reactive, more in rhythm. And as you return to the bowl again and again, you start to trust something simple. Healing doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't always have to be deep work. Sometimes it's letting sound reach what words can't, letting vibration move what thinking never could. This is how singing bowls become a companion on the Zen path. They do not replace silence. They return you to it, cleared, lighter, open. And in that openness, peace is not something you seek. It becomes the space you begin to live from. After sound has moved through the body, after vibration has softened tension and brought awareness to places words could never reach, you return to life with more space inside. You feel clearer, lighter, but then life meets you again, not in silence, not in serenity, but in friction. Someone says something that stings, a boundary is crossed, a misunderstanding builds, and before you know it, the nervous system tightens, breath shortens. The peace you worked for feels like it's slipping through your fingers. This is the true test of presence, not in stillness, but in conflict. Zen does not remove conflict from life. It teaches how to meet it differently, not with suppression, not with passivity, but with awareness. Conflict is not a failure of spiritual practice. It is a chance to deepen it. And through Zen, even arguments can become part of the path, not because they feel good, but because they reveal where you are still attached, still reactive, still protecting something fragile inside. The first step in mindful conflict is staying in the body. When tension arises, most people move into the mind. They prepare defenses, they build narratives, but the body is where the truth lives. You notice the clenched jaw, the rising heat in the chest, the desire to interrupt. These are signals, not to act, but to pause. Zen teaches that the pause is powerful. It is not avoidance. It is where clarity lives. A single breath before responding can change everything. Not just the outcome of the conversation, but the emotional residue it leaves behind. When you remain present during conflict, your goal shifts. You are no longer trying to win. You are trying to stay, to remain connected to yourself while engaging with another. This shift changes your tone, your words, your energy. You stop escalating. You start listening, not just to the words being said, but to the need underneath them. Listening in Zen is not passive. It is full attention. You hear not only the surface, but the silence beneath it. You feel the rhythm of the conversation. You notice when the other person is speaking from fear, from hurt, from ego, and you choose not to match that frequency. Instead of reacting, you reflect. You may say, "I'm hearing a lot of frustration. Can we slow this down?" You may acknowledge, "This is hard for me to hear, but I want to stay open." These statements are not tactics. They are truth. They keep the space from collapsing. The next principle is non-attachment to being right. Conflict often becomes toxic because both sides are clinging to a version of the truth that validates their pain. Zen invites you to hold your truth lightly, to say what's real for you without needing the other person to agree, to express clearly without trying to control the outcome. This doesn't mean abandoning your needs. It means expressing them from groundedness. When you are calm, your message is clearer. When you are connected to breath, your voice is steady. When your nervous system is not in fight mode, your words carry less charge. You also learn to tolerate discomfort. Conflict is uncomfortable, but presence teaches you to sit with that discomfort without collapsing or lashing out. You feel the sensation rise, peak, and pass. You learn to ride the wave rather than drown in it. In Zen, this is called remaining in the middle, not pulled into extremes, not lost in reactivity, staying centered even when others are not. This takes practice, but each time you do it, you rewire your emotional habits. You prove to yourself that you can be in conflict without losing yourself. Compassion becomes part of the equation. You don't need to agree to care. You can understand someone's pain without condoning their behavior. You can say, "I see how this hurt you," while still holding your boundary. Compassion makes space, even when connection is strained. You also learn to observe your own ego. Notice when you're arguing just to be heard, when you're speaking from pride, not clarity, when you want to punish, not resolve. These moments are not wrong. They are invitations. They show you where you still need care, still need presence, still need healing. Zen teaches that conflict mirrors the inner world. The anger you feel toward others often reflects unhealed wounds inside. The more you've worked with your own pain, the less you project it. You stop blaming others for making you feel what's already there. This awareness creates more freedom. You stop needing others to behave perfectly in order to feel okay. You stop giving them control over your peace. You reclaim your power by choosing how you respond. In a practical sense, mindful conflict means speaking with intention, using pauses, naming emotions, asking for space if needed, returning to the breath when overwhelmed. It means not interrupting, not defending, not escalating. It means staying connected to your values even when things feel chaotic. You can also set agreements in advance with those you trust. Agreements like, "We will take a break if voices rise," or "We will return to this after calming down." These aren't rules, they're containers. They help protect connection during stress. When conflict does get heated, you recover more quickly. You don't spiral into shame or blame. You acknowledge the moment. You reflect. You repair. This ability to repair is more important than perfection. Every relationship will face tension. The question is, can you stay? Can you come back? Mindful conflict isn't about being neutral. It's about being awake. You may still feel anger. You may still express strong emotions, but you do it with awareness, not from impulse. You speak from the center, not from the wound. And when the argument ends, there's less residue. You don't carry the weight into the next day. You don't replay it endlessly, because you were there, fully. You didn't abandon yourself. You didn't betray the other. You stayed in the fire, and it didn't burn you. It refined you. Over time, your presence becomes part of your reputation. People feel safer around you, even in hard conversations. They trust your steadiness. They respect your honesty. And you begin to trust yourself more too. Conflict then becomes part of the path. A teacher, a mirror, a chance to deepen, not distance. This is the Zen way, meeting life as it is, meeting others as they are, staying grounded even in tension, choosing presence over protection, choosing clarity over chaos, and choosing peace, not because it's easy, but because it's worth it. One breath, one pause, one honest word, and the fire becomes light. You've just spent over 3 hours walking the quiet, powerful path of Zen, not as philosophy, but as lived experience. You've faced the weight of old wounds, not by running from them, but by sitting with them. You've learned to release justice and embrace peace, to listen without reacting, to forgive without needing permission. You've used breath, sound, stillness, dreams, and even ink to return to what matters. From letting go of deep resentment to sleeping like a monk. From holding your inner child with compassion to walking with past pain until it finally dissolved. From honoring grief with each step in your garden to sending old stories up in smoke. You've practiced presence not just in quiet, but in conflict, not just in solitude, but in connection. This isn't just Zen, it's your life, reclaimed. And now, I want to hear from you. Which moment spoke to you the loudest? Which practice are you going to start tonight? Drop a comment below and write, "My peace begins with." Then complete the sentence in your own words. Let your healing speak. Let it inspire someone else. If this journey moved you, supported you, or simply gave you a breath of calm in a chaotic world, subscribe to the channel. Click the bell so you'll know when we walk this path again, because your healing isn't done, and neither is this journey. Now, close your eyes, take one last breath, and carry the silence with you.